Chapter 1131. In the Depths of the Underworld. The two sermon had officially ended. All the strange phenomena disappeared, and the various rules were hidden again. Qin Shujian's aura did not change much. On the other hand, Goddess Pingxin's aura fluctuated a little, as if she had gained something. I have gained a lot from this discussion with Emperor Qin. Goddess Pingxin smiled. That perfect face that did not seem like something that could exist in the mortal world. If ordinary people saw it, they would instantly lose their minds. Qin Shujian's expression was normal as he said with a faint smile, I have also gained a lot from discussing the Tao with Goddess Pingxin. After this discussion, I have to digest it properly.
Then,
the smile on his face disappeared and turned serious. There's not much time left. I estimate that in another 2 or 3 years, the real power will invade on a large scale. At that time, we will either fall into the mortal world or reign over the 9 heavens. Emperor Qin, what do you think will happen to us? Goddess Pingxin asked in return. Hearing this, Qin Shujian had a proud expression on his face. I am the Emperor of Heaven. I will naturally reign over the 9 heavens and look down on all living beings.
After saying that,
he left the underworld. Reign over the 9 heavens. Goddess Pingxin whispered softly, and her expression changed slightly. Although I don't expect to reign over the 9 heavens, I don't want all living beings to be destroyed here. Looking at the huge underworld, there were billions of living beings there. And above the underworld was the boundless world with billions of living beings. If she were to sit and watch billions of living beings be destroyed, it would not be what she wanted.
Then,
Goddess Pingxin waved her jade-like hand, and the void in front of her shook. The rules in the underworld seemed to be pulled by something and gathered in her direction. The rules condensed. The void shook. Not long after, all the precepts gathered together to form a palm-sized disc. There were 6 petals engraved on the disc. At first glance, it looked like a blooming lotus flower. The disc quietly stayed in the void.
Then,
Goddess Pingxin's mind sank into the underworld, and then, in the dark, she caught a trace of weak power. When that wisp of power arrived, the void collapsed silently, and all the nearby Yin-Qi was also corroded. Even if it was the rules, there were faint signs of collapse. Lady Pingxin's expression was extremely solemn. She focused all of her attention on controlling that strand of energy to descend. Finally, it landed on the round plate. Instantly, the disc shook violently.
Crack.
An almost undetectable sound was heard, and cracks appeared on the disc. Regarding this, she did not mind and allowed the disc to absorb the surrounding energy to repair her body. She, on the other hand, was fully focused on controlling the wisp of energy. Gradually, the power fused with the disc. The cracks on the disc became more and more serious. However, whenever the cracks on the disc reached a certain level, it would frantically absorb the power of the underworld to repair itself. Rumble. Energy gushed forth like a river. At the same time, the laws of the underworld manifested and continuously transmitted power into the underworld. A long time later, the cracks on the disc disappeared. As for that strand of energy, it was officially absorbed by the disc. In the end, it looked like a 6-petaled round plate, and on one of the petal, there were 3 mysterious words. Celestial Realm. At this moment, Lady Pingxin's aura changed, and her face was pale. However, she was not discouraged at all. Instead, she looked at the disc in front of her and revealed a knowing smile. As expected, only true power is the foundation for the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Now that the 6 paths of reincarnation disc has taken shape, the rules of the underworld have become stronger. Lady Pingxin held the disc with one hand, and a mysterious power rose from the disc.
Then,
with a thought, she directly threw the disc into the void. In an instant, the underworld shook again. All the living beings instinctively looked up, but they couldn't see anything. Only some top experts could vaguely feel that the space of the underworld seemed to have become stronger. It was also when the 6 paths of reincarnation disc appeared. Purple Cloud Palace, Demon Palace, Great Thunderclap Temple. Qin Shujian, who was in the heavenly court, also sensed something and turned to look at the underworld. The underworld's foundation is really deep. Buddha Sakya sighed. Although they were all experts of the first era in terms of foundation, the one in the underworld was much deeper than him. After all, that was an existence who established the underworld with his own strength. In comparison, although he was the ruler of the Buddhist sect, he was not the first person to establish the Buddhist sect. Then, Buddha Sakya retracted his gaze and looked down again. Over there were tens of thousands of living beings who had shaved their heads and converted. They were silently chanting scriptures. Dense Buddhist light rose from these people, causing the entire Great Thunderclap Temple to become extremely solemn. Seeing this, Buddha Sakya was also rather gratified, although his foundation was not good and could not be compared to the underworld. However, this era was also very friendly to the Buddhist sect. There was no so-called conflict between Taoists and Buddhists here, nor was there any prejudice against the Buddhist sect. The tens of thousands of races in this era, what they advocated was the most direct power. Whoever had the strongest power, whoever could give them power, then they would believe in whoever they belonged to. In the first era, it was not as easy for the Buddhist sect to recruit believers. Just like now. He only had to display some divine abilities, and there was an endless stream of living beings who came to join him. Moreover, as the first batch of Buddhist sect members traveled the world, the Buddhist sect's influence quietly grew in the North Continent. When the Buddhist sect was growing stronger, Buddha Sakya could clearly feel that the Buddhist sect's luck was also rising day by day. As the master of the Buddhist sect, his strength naturally rose steadily with the Buddhist sect's luck. Amitabha. Buddha Sakya chanted a Buddhist name. The 12th grade golden lotus beneath him slowly rotated, and vaguely, it seemed like the 13th lotus was about to grow. When the Buddhist disciples below heard this, they stopped chanting and looked up at the golden lotus above. "May I ask if you have any instructions, Buddha?" Someone asked respectfully. Buddha Sakya made a flower-pinching gesture with a compassionate expression on his face. "I was just in a trance when I suddenly had an epiphany. Now that all living beings are suffering, the Buddha is merciful and can't bear to see all living beings fall into suffering. From today onwards, all Buddhas will leave the Great Thunderclap Temple and travel to the 4 great continents to spread the ideals of the Buddhist sect and transcend the sea of suffering for all living beings." Buddha is merciful. The many Buddhist disciples below all bowed. Some people understood in their hearts. The Buddhist sect just wanted to use this opportunity to strengthen their own forces. But for this, they had no intention of objecting. After all, they were members of the Buddhist sect. If the Buddhist sect strengthened, it would also be beneficial for them. 6 paths of reincarnation. Qin Shujian came out of seclusion. He looked in the direction of the underworld. His gaze directly pierced through the barrier of heaven and earth and landed on the disc. The 6 paths of reincarnation disc. That was a top-notch supreme treasure. When he absorbed a portion of Goddess Pingxin's true power and fused it into it, he had already established the supreme foundation of the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. At this moment, the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was only in its embryonic form, but its power was already not weaker than an ordinary connate supreme treasure. If he waited until the 6 paths of reincarnation disc was completely perfected, Qin Shujian had a premonition. That might be a supreme treasure that surpassed an immortal divine weapon. 6 paths of reincarnation. It had always been a very mysterious thing. He had only learned a little about it after entering the real world through life and death. This kind of existence was very mysterious to the real world. In the great wide world, it was not something that others could understand. The rules of heaven and earth are even more perfect. Qin Shujian looked up at the sky. The mother stream of rules that was hidden in the void directly appeared in his line of sight. The mother stream of rules. That was the place where all the rules of heaven and earth gathered. Now, with the appearance of the underworld and the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, the rules in the mother stream of rules had become more and more perfect. As the Emperor of Heaven, He could clearly feel it. With the perfection of the mother stream of rules, the strength of the heavenly Tao of the great wide world was also steadily increasing. Fortunately, the heavenly Tao was not a cultivator in the true sense. It was just a combination of the thoughts of all living beings. Its purpose was to maintain the normal operation of heaven and earth.
So,
No matter how strong the heavenly Tao was, it did not have much of an impact on him, unless, one day, if he did something that harmed heaven and earth. In that case, the heavenly Tao would be an obstacle. The rules of heaven and earth are perfect. The power that I, the Emperor of Heaven, can borrow is even stronger. Qin Shujian said with a smile, although he had almost never borrowed the power of the Emperor of Heaven.
however,
It could not be explained because of this. The power of the heavenly Emperor-Empyrean position was completely useless. Strictly speaking, the Emperor of Heaven was able to rule over the myriad races and gather the destiny of the myriad races. He himself possessed supreme power. However, the Emperor of Heaven was only the ruler of heaven and earth. If he wanted to borrow the power of the Emperor of Heaven, he had to be in the great wide world. Once he left the great wide world, there was not much power that he could borrow from the Emperor of Heaven. Because of this, Qin Shujian had fought with the Tao fruit a few times, but he did not borrow the power of the Emperor of Heaven because there was no need for that. That bit of power, it could not change anything at all. Look, if they fought in heaven and earth. He was confident. Even if he did not use all his trump cards, just by borrowing the power of the Emperor of Heaven, he would be able to contend with Hong Jun, who had reached the Tao integration stage. If he used all his trump cards, not to mention Hong Jun, even if all the Tao fruits were added together, they would be able to hang him up and beat him. He closed his eyes. Qin Shujian's spiritual will merged with heaven and earth. Inside the core of heaven and earth, there was a round ball sitting there quietly. Countless rules condensed and lingered on the ball. Occasionally, the aura that leaked out could turn a perfected immortal into ashes. Heavenly Tao. Qin Shujian looked at the ball with a calm expression. Before the heavenly Tao woke up, it was in this state. The ball itself was the combination of all the rules, so this was the normal state of the heavenly Tao. In the core of heaven and earth, it was filled with gray and silver power. Among them, the gray power represented the illusory power, and the silver power represented the real power. The real power has already invaded the core of heaven and earth. It won't be long before the entire core of heaven and earth is assimilated by the real power. When that time comes, the entire upper-class world will be completely destroyed. Qin Shujian looked at the silver real power that was devouring the gray illusory power bit by bit. He understood that there was not much time left. The so-called fusion. It was not a fusion in the true sense. It was a buffer formed during the process of the real power devouring the illusory power. This buffer, it could give the living beings of the upper-class world a chance to comprehend the real power. However, if the real power completely occupied the core of heaven and earth, then the core of heaven and earth would directly disappear. The core of heaven and earth would disappear. The heavenly Tao would naturally cease to exist. The heavenly Tao would cease to exist. The heaven and earth would naturally cease to exist. In Qin Shujian's line of sight, the real power had already occupied more than half of the core of heaven and earth. The remaining illusory power and the heavenly Tao had been forced into a corner, passively defending. If heaven and earth are destroyed, then the living beings that exist in heaven and earth will also be completely destroyed. It was just like the world where tyrant god supremacy existed. Heaven and earth would decay. All the true immortals would be forced to fall. The living beings of heaven and earth were closely related to their own heaven and earth. Unless they reached the step of transcendence, the decline and destruction of heaven and earth would have a great impact on them. If you don't want to fall, you either have to stop the destruction of heaven and earth or transcend yourself. Stopping the destruction of heaven and earth is very difficult. The only thing left is to think of a way to transcendence. Qin Shujian's gaze was deep. What was transcendence? breaking free from the shackles of the original heaven, and earth was considered transcendence. Right now, for the living beings of the upper-class world, transcendence was not difficult, but it was not easy either. As long as they grasped a bit of the real power, if they could transform themselves from illusory to real, then they would be able to transcendence. Unlike the real world, which is difficult to transcend, the living beings of the illusory world only need to get rid of their illusory identity if they want to transcend. In the past, the living beings of the illusory world did not have this opportunity. But now that the real power has invaded, the opportunity has arrived. As for whether they can grasp it or not, it will depend on themselves. Qin Shu Jian was not worried about himself, because he did not belong to this world at all. After opening up his inner world, he had become the ruler of this world. Therefore, whether the upper-class world was destroyed or not, it would not affect him. Besides, after comprehending the red lotus of purgation, Qin Shu Jian had already grasped a bit of the real power. As long as he strengthened this bit of power, it would be easy for him to transcend in the future. As for the other cultivators of the myriad races, whether they could achieve 100% transcendence would depend on their own luck. Now, the real power was fused. Anyone with some talent and luck might be able to comprehend the real power from it.
Then
he strengthened the real power and allowed himself to transcend. He calmed his mind. Qin Shu Jian looked at the gray and silver characters in front of him, and his expression kept changing. After an unknown period of time, he seemed to have made a decision. After pausing for a long time, he finally moved. He took a step forward. Qin Shu Jian's body, which was originally wrapped in the gray power, directly left and entered the silver power. Corrosion. Extremely strong corrosion. At that moment, Qin Shu Jian felt that his soul was like water entering a pot of oil, and it was immediately burning and boiling. The intense pain went straight into the depths of his soul. If it was an ordinary person, this intense pain had already exceeded the limit of what they could bear. And once it exceeded the limit of what they could bear, they would die from the pain. But for Qin Shu Jian, although this kind of intense pain was intense, it was not to the point of being unbearable. His expression did not change. He slowly walked deep into the silver power. Falsehood was like a bubble to reality. One only needed to poke it lightly with one's finger to completely extinguish it. As strong as the universe, under the invasion of the real power, it would only fall apart. Real. Qin Shu Jian felt the power that was constantly corroding his soul, and there was a determined look in his eyes. Real power. This was the real power. It was extremely powerful, even though he was already considered a supreme expert in the universe. When his soul came into contact with the real power, it was still unbearable. For this, he also understood how much the real power was above the illusory power. I have to master enough real power to allow me to further transform. Qin Shu Jian's expression was firm. He had to transform, even though he was now in control of the real power. But in fact, that level of real power was still far from enough. The path I take is different from others. Strictly speaking, my path is the same as the world's way of heaven. The stronger my inner world is, the stronger the power I control will be. By the same logic, if the inner world gets rid of the false and retains the real, then I will naturally enter the stage of getting rid of the false and retaining the real. Qin Shu Jian was very clear about the path he was going to take. Compared to other creatures in the great wide world, he actually had a great advantage. That was to open up the inner world. If the inner world can successfully get rid of the false and retain the real, then all the creatures in the inner world will be transformed into real creatures. In this way, the power I can borrow will be even stronger. Thinking of this, Qin Shu Jian was also a little excited. This was his biggest trump card. Think about it. If the transformation of the inner world was successful, it would be equivalent to him controlling a real world. Then, at the critical moment, with the interference of another real world, it was easy to imagine what would happen. Because of this, that was why Qin Shu Jian was so excited. He calmed down. He began to calm down. All the conjectures, were just conjectures. As for the specifics, he had to practice it to be clear. If he couldn't withstand the erosion of the real power, or if he couldn't transform the inner world into a real existence, then all his conjectures would be useless. He would do it as soon as he thought of it. Qin Shu Jian immediately calmed his mind. While his soul was being eroded, he silently comprehended the real power. All powers lead to the same destination. Even if the real power is completely superior to the illusory power, to a certain extent, the essence of the two is the same. While his soul was being eroded, his mind sank into the real power, trying to comprehend something from it. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 1 day, 2 days, 1 month, 2 months. In the core of the silver and gray world, a divine soul completely left the gray area and entered the silver area. And under the erosion of the silver power, the soul was like a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any time. Until now, Qin Shu Jian had forgotten how long he had stayed in the real power. He always felt that he was only a step away from comprehending the real power. That feeling, it forced him to go deeper and deeper.
Suddenly,
there was a premonition of death in his mind. In an instant, Qin Shu Jian's mind, which was immersed in the real power, immediately woke up. When he woke up, he realized what kind of state he was in now. His soul was weak, like a candle in the wind. Like the next breath, it would be completely annihilated. Not good. This discovery made Qin Shu Jian's face change drastically. Unknowingly, he was completely immersed in the real power, and the sharp pain at the beginning had disappeared by now. Because of this, he actually lost awareness of the corrosion of the real power. If it wasn't for the premonition in the dark, he would definitely have silently and completely died here.
Suddenly,
Qin Shu Jian's face was ugly. The real power is indeed terrifying. It can actually make me close to death unknowingly. Now his soul was weak. He felt that his soul was about to be extinguished at any time. Looking back again, the illusory power was very far away. At this time, even if he wanted to go back again, it seemed that it was too late.
Not only that,
there was the barrier of the real power. Qin Shu Jian also found that it seemed to be difficult for him to take back his soul. Could it be, I will die here?
When he thought of this, his heart was heavy.
If he had fallen so easily, then what was the point of him returning from death to life, and then killing his way back? No, I can't die just like that. Qin Shu Jian's heart was full of unwillingness. He was unwilling to die just like that. He was the strongest person in the great wide world. He was destined to be the ruler of the 9 heavens.
Wait.
Suddenly, another thought emerged in his mind. Immediately, Qin Shu Jian calmed his mind and began to communicate with something. Not long after, a red lotus appeared from the depths of his soul. Then, the red lotus grew rapidly and soon covered his entire body. The red lotus covered his entire body. The real power that was corroding his soul seemed to have encountered a powerful obstacle and immediately retreated a lot. Although there was still a part of it that couldn't be removed. But compared to before, it was already much better. It's indeed useful. Qin Shu Jian was overjoyed. The red lotus of purgation was an existence that touched the real level. He just wanted to try and see if he could resist the erosion of the real power.
He didn't expect.
It was really possible. With the protection of the red lotus of purgation, although it couldn't completely isolate the erosion of the real power, it could at least isolate 90% of the power, which greatly cushioned his soul that was on the verge of destruction.
Then,
Qin Shu Jian prepared to retreat from the real power. But, just as he was about to retreat, he thought of another thing. The red lotus of purgation can refine everything in the great wide world. Then, is it possible to refine the real power? Qin Shu Jian's eyes lit up. Refining the real power. If it was really possible, then he would save a lot of steps to comprehend the real power in the future. He did it as soon as he thought of it. He immediately controlled the red lotus of purgation, then wrapped a ball of real power and burned it with all his strength. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, 7 breaths later. The red lotus of purgation quietly extinguished, and the real power that was wrapped also broke free.
Seeing this,
Qin Shujian suddenly frowned. It couldn't?
no.
It wasn't that the red lotus of purgation couldn't do it, but that it had refined too much real power. Although the red lotus of purgation was also a supernatural power that touched the real level. But seriously, the real power in the red lotus of purgation was actually not strong. It was compared to a ball of fire, and then the real power was compared to a bowl of water. There was too much water. Naturally, the fire would be put out. But at the same time, if there was too little water, not only would it not be able to put out the fire, but it would also be evaporated by the fire. With this in mind, Qin Shujian immediately changed his method. He no longer used the red lotus of purgation to directly refine a large ball of real power. Instead, he absorbed a weak trace of real power and then refined it with his supernatural power. Under the wrapping of the red lotus, that trace of real power rushed left and right, as if it felt that it was going to die. It kept struggling, trying to break free from the shackles. It was useless. No matter how hard that trace of real power tried to attack, it couldn't change anything. Time passed bit by bit. Finally, that trace of real power began to be gradually refined under the burning of the red lotus of purgation. Watching the real power being refined step by step, Qin Shujian's eyes were filled with joy.
Then,
he increased the refining power.
Soon,
a silver crystal object about the size of a tenth of a fingernail fell into his hand. This is the crystallization of real power. Qin Shujian looked at the object in his hand, and the joy on his face became more obvious. He could feel the extremely pure real power from the silver crystal object. Without hesitation, his divine soul wrapped the silver crystal.
Suddenly,
the silver crystal melted and merged into his divine soul. At that moment, Qin Shujian felt that his divine soul that was on the verge of destruction seemed to have received a lot of nourishment and recovered a lot in an instant. Not only that, deep in his divine soul, there were some unknown changes faintly. That change was very weak, but it gave people a feeling that it was extremely powerful. Yes, that's the feeling.
Qin Shujian was relieved.
He was a person who had been through life and death. He was very clear about the feeling of real power, the change in his divine soul at the moment. It was a process of getting rid of the false and retaining the real. It's just that the real power just now is too weak and couldn't play a big role. I need more real power. Qin Shujian's eyes were filled with a cold light. He wanted real power. He wanted more real power. Right now, there was a lot of real power in the core of heaven and earth. That was the means of the invasion of the four-player worlds. If he could refine all the power here, then even the heaven's path in the real world wouldn't be able to compete with him. However, the heaven's path in the player worlds wouldn't allow him to absorb the power here. Right now, it was just that he didn't refine much, and the other party wouldn't notice. But once he refined too much, the heaven's path in the player worlds would definitely notice that something was wrong. After all, if he wanted to take a shortcut, he had to take some risks. This was inevitable. Immediately, Qin Shujian didn't waste any time and continued to refine the real power. No matter what, before the heaven's path in the player worlds discovered that something was wrong, he had to refine the real power as much as possible. In the inner hall of the heavenly palace, Qin Shujian's body, which was sitting upright on the emperor's throne, also leaked out a terrifying aura. Godslayer and Zhou Tian's star map, which existed in his sea of consciousness, were secretly shocked. What kind of magic technique is the Emperor of Heaven cultivating? Why is his aura so terrifying? Zhou Tian's star map was shocked. Ever since he became an existence comparable to a primordial treasure, everything he encountered was beyond the limit of what he could bear. The Hongjun and Luo Ho in the previous battle was like this. Whether it was the Good Fortune Jade Disc or the God-Killing Spear, their levels were much higher than his.
And now,
in Qin Shujian's Sea of Consciousness, there was a terrifying power pervading. In front of that power, Zhou Tian's star map felt its insignificance. Godslayer said in a deep voice, "If I'm not wrong, This power should be the real power. The Emperor of Heaven is comprehending the real power. He was an immortal divine weapon. Strictly speaking, it was also a divine weapon that involved the real level. It was different from Zubing's faith that permeated everything. After abandoning the existence of the power of faith, Zubing's essence was still at the level of illusion. Once the power of faith was lost, it would fall to dust. But an immortal divine weapon was different. Divine weapons at this level were immortal and indestructible. The essence of a divine weapon. It had already transcended the shackles of illusion and was qualified to step into the real level. In this way, Godslayer was also very familiar with the real power. After all, how could he not be familiar with the power contained in his own body? You mean, the Emperor of Heaven is comprehending the real power? Zhou Tian's star map was shocked. He could not sense at all what kind of method Qin Shujian was using to comprehend. In the past, when the other party was cultivating, he could vaguely sense something when he existed in the other party's sea of consciousness. But it was the first time that he felt nothing at all. Godslayer said, "The Emperor of Heaven's means are not what you and I can guess. Now that there is real power in the sea of consciousness, it is the opportunity for you and me to comprehend. Seize the opportunity well. If you waste it, there won't be a next time." After that, he stopped talking and silently comprehended the power. Hearing that, Zhou Tian's star map also calmed his mind to cultivate. While the two magic weapons were unaware, a mysterious power fell from the sea of consciousness and integrated into the inner world that had been opened up in his body. The real power integrated. His inner world was also changing imperceptibly. Heavenly Court. A court meeting was being held. Feng suddenly stopped talking and looked up at the sky. There was only an endless void there. However, he could feel that something was descending from the dark. Seeing this, the gods in Heavenly Court. Puzzled looks appeared on their faces. "May I ask, Emperor of Heaven, what happened?" An immortal god cupped his hands and asked. They also raised their heads to look, but somehow, they couldn't sense anything. Hearing that, Feng retracted his gaze and shook his head slightly. "It's nothing. I just felt something different in the dark. I think it's probably an illusion." Seeing this, the gods did not ask anything else. The court meeting dispersed. The gods retreated. Feng was still sitting on the throne. He looked up at the sky with a solemn expression. If the previous part was an illusion, then now, once again, he felt the changes in his body. Heaven and earth seemed to be transforming. Feng retracted his gaze and looked down at his palm. There was an endless power of rules brewing in his palm. After a long time, the power retreated. His body disappeared from the Emperor's throne. Eldar Mountain Range. Since the Eldar was defeated, most of the Eldar retreated back to the Eldar Mountain Range. As a top race second only to the human race. Even if the Eldar was defeated, their strength was not something the other races could compare to. Therefore, no race felt like trespassing into the Eldar Mountain Range. Just like before, this was still Eldar's own territory. Eldar Palace. Ever since the last defeat, the palace had been completely sealed. Until now, many years had passed, but the palace still did not open at all. Inside the palace, Ling Huang sat on the throne with his eyes closed, as if his mind was wandering. Breathing in and out. There were Tao rhythms circulating in the palace.
Suddenly,
the Tao rhythms in the palace were chaotic. Ling Huang opened his closed eyes. His expression did not change. His voice was neither fast nor slow. "Emperor of Heaven, why are you free to visit my Eldar today? I have always respected Ling Huang. I haven't seen you for many years. Today, I especially came to visit you. I hope you don't mind, Ling Huang." Feng smiled slightly. With a wave of his hand, he condensed a chair and sat on it. The chair rose. In the blink of an eye, he was on equal footing with Ling Huang. Ling Huang's expression was indifferent. If Ben Huang said that he minded, would the Emperor of Heaven leave immediately? It seems that Ling Huang really hates me. Feng shook his head and laughed. His voice was as usual, without any anger. Hearing this, Ling Huang said indifferently, Ben Huang doesn't like people who barge in without a word. However, you are the Emperor of Heaven. You are the ruler of the great wide world. Ben Huang can't say anything. However, when the next great calamity comes, you and I will have a good fight. Ben Huang also wants to see if you are really that powerful. He did not hide his thoughts at all. Back then, Eldar was defeated by the human race. Within 1,000,000 years, Eldar did not have the right to resist. Regarding this, even though the Spirit Emperor was indignant in his heart, he could still bear with it. After all, his skills were inferior. There was nothing to say. Even if the real reason for his failure was not because Feng's power was really unparalleled, but because of external factors. However, a defeat was a defeat. There was no point in saying so much. Feng was silent for a while, then said calmly, I will give you this chance. I know that you are not satisfied with your defeat back then. When the time comes, you and I will fight again. But there is one thing that I still want to say first. That is, if Ling Huang is defeated again, I don't want Eldar to shake the human race's rule. Otherwise, I will not be merciful to any existence that may threaten the human race. Although his words were calm, the warning was not less. Ling Huang's expression was strange. You seem very confident? As the Emperor of Heaven, I naturally have this confidence. Feng smiled faintly. An aura like the might of the heavens leaked out from his body, instantly dispersing the Dao aura in the hall. Ling Huang's expression did not change, but his aura also erupted. The two auras collided, and then both disappeared into nothingness. Good. Ling Huang sat up straight, looking at the person in front of him with a serious expression. Ben Huang promises you that if I am defeated again, as long as Ben Huang does not die, Eldar will forever submit to the human race. Similarly, if you are defeated, the position of Emperor of Heaven will change. At the same time, before you die, the human race will forever submit to Eldar. This was a bet based on the existence of both of them. As long as they did not die, then the bet would always be valid.
Similarly,
if either of them died, then there was no need for the bet to exist. Feng understood what he meant. Hearing this, he nodded. All right, since the Spirit Emperor is straightforward, I will accept it. He received an answer. Ling Huang returned to his original state.
His tone was calm.
All right, Emperor of Heaven, you didn't come here just to talk to Ben Huang about this, did you? Ling Huang's eyes are as sharp as torches. Feng first smiled. Then, his expression turned serious. In this world, only you and I have reached the half-step Dao fruit realm. You should be able to sense that some unpredictable changes are happening in the world. Changes. Ling Huang's expression changed. He did not look at Feng, but at the sky above the hall, his eyes turning deep. That's right. Heaven and earth are changing. This sovereign can sense that his cultivation level is falling bit by bit. At the same time, the laws of heaven and earth are becoming stronger. As cultivators who control the laws, we are the ones who are in control of the laws. As for the laws we control, the amount of power we can control is correspondingly decreasing. If the power of a complete law was compared to 100, then the power of a half-step Dao fruit cultivator was also 100. Then this kind of control could be called 100%. However, if the power of the laws suddenly skyrocketed from 100 to 1,000, then the power of a half-step Dao fruit cultivator would not directly become 1,000, but still stay at 100. In this way, the power of control, it fell from 100% to 10%. The power of control of the laws fell. Naturally, the realm would fall. Although the current change in the laws was not as exaggerated as directly changing from 100 to 1,000, it was still growing bit by bit. Feng's expression was calm. Yes, our cultivation level is falling, but the power we control has not fallen by much. Instead, it is stronger than before. If there are no other changes, then it can be considered a good thing. Now, the only thing I am worried about is that there will be other changes in the world. That will be a big problem. Even as the Emperor of Heaven, the current changes made Feng feel that it was quite troublesome. The increase in one's strength was certainly gratifying. But the fall of the realm was another problem. There was no guarantee what other unforeseen changes would occur. In general, everything seemed to be out of his control. Ling Huang said, "Whether the change is good or bad, Ben Huang is not sure, but this change is not something you and I can stop." Perhaps the only person who truly understands why the world is changing is the Venerable One. If we can find the Venerable One, all the problems can be solved. Venerable One, the Emperor of Heaven murmured and then sighed heavily. How could he not want to find him? The problem was, there was no way to find him. In the core of the world, Qin Shujian's soul was wrapped by the red lotus of purgation. No matter how the real power burned and corroded, the soul that was on the verge of destruction actually stabilized bit by bit. Not only that, after the soul stabilized, it was still slowly becoming stronger. The burning of the red lotus also became more intense. Refine, refine, refine. Qin Shujian was now completely immersed in the pleasure of absorbing the real power. The red lotus of purgation was constantly refining silver crystals for him to absorb and refine. As he mastered more and more real power, the red lotus of purgation was also becoming more and more powerful. At the same time, the real power that could be refined had also increased from a trace to a mass now. In the core of the world, a blooming red lotus was wrapped in a mass of silver power that was constantly burning and refining. After a long time, the mass of silver power gradually shrank and condensed. In the end, it turned into a silver crystal the size of a baby's fist and fell into Qin Shujian's hand. This was the only time he had refined such a powerful silver crystal after refining the real power for a long time. The inner world is about to transform successfully. Looking at the silver crystal, Qin Shujian smiled slightly. Although his soul entered the core of the world, it was also closely connected to his physical body. The inner world in his physical body was already transforming bit by bit when he kept transmitting the real power back. If the inner world in front of him was qualified to accommodate the existence of the Tao fruit level, then the upper limit of the inner world now was only the level 9 immortal. The lowering of the upper limit of the world might seem like a bad thing. In fact, it was not. There were two types of lowering of the upper limit of the world. One was when the world was on the verge of destruction, and the upper limit was lowered step by step, thus entering the stage of destruction. The other type, it was just like the inner world. The lowering of the upper limit of the world was just a process of getting rid of the false and retaining the real. After all, compared to real power, the power of the false was too superficial. If they were to really compete, a Tao fruit of the false world would definitely not be able to compete with a true immortal who completely mastered the real power of the real world. This was the difference between the two. Although the power of the Tao fruit was much stronger than that of a true immortal in terms of quantity. However, the boundary between the false and the real made the difference in quality between the two. In other words, if the domineering god in Yihang's Sea of Consciousness was at his peak, Qin Shujian's Emperor of Heaven incarnation would definitely not be able to compete with him. Not only that, in fact, even the current domineering god lord could not be so easily erased with his incarnation. It was just that when domineering god lord felt the aura, he was already trembling in fear and did not dare to make a move at all. If he really made a move, the other party would find out. The person he was afraid of was actually not as strong as he imagined. Even a half-crippled true immortal's remnant soul was like this. If it was a true immortal in the real world, then one could imagine the power of the Tao fruit. It was only reflected in the upper-class world. If he really encountered a true immortal in the real world at his peak, the Tao fruit of the false world would be a joke. Unless some people could achieve the Tao fruit of the real world. Therefore, in the process of getting rid of the false and retaining the real in the inner world, the lowering of the upper limit of the world was inevitable, because this was removing impurities and purifying the world itself. The 9th level of immortal is not the limit. I wonder if, after the inner world completely transforms, will it directly fall to the level of a true immortal? Qin Shujian pondered for a moment. He did not have time to refine and continued to refine and swallow the silver crystal. After the silver crystal was swallowed, Yizichen swallowed it. His inner world had undergone another metamorphosis. The original upper limit of the 9th level of immortal gradually became unstable. Boom! As the silver crystal was refined, Yizichen began to refine it. The red lotus of purgation seemed to have been poured with kerosene. The red lotus, which was already fierce and beautiful, instantly became even more terrifying. Refining it bit by bit is really too slow. Even if the real power I refined did not disturb the attention of the heavenly axiom of the player's worlds, the longer I delay, the closer the time of their attack will be. If I don't complete the transformation and it's time to attack, it will be very troublesome. Qin Shujian's eyes were cold and sharp. If it was a normal time, he could refine the real power bit by bit. There was no need to go through so much trouble.
But now, no.
There was not much time to begin with. According to Qin Shujian's estimation, the real attack of the player's world would take at least 3 years and at least 5 years. By the time he entered the core of heaven and earth, almost a year had passed.
And now,
although there was no concept of the flow of time in the core of the world,
but
Qin Shujian could vaguely sense that he had been in there for quite some time. In this way, after he came out, the vast 1,000 worlds were all dead and injured. That would be a big problem. At this moment, he didn't dare to waste even a second of time. Speed up the refining. That was inevitable. I have swallowed a lot of real power now. Although my soul has not really transformed successfully, it is much stronger than before. In this case, I don't need to use the red lotus of purgation to protect myself. Activate the red lotus of purgation with all my strength and refine the real power. After Qin Shujian made the decision, he immediately removed the power of the red lotus of purgation that covered his soul. In an instant, without the protection of the red lotus of purgation, a large amount of real power rushed over. The familiar sharp pain. It attacked his heart again. However, compared to the previous excruciating pain that could destroy one's spirit, the excruciating pain this time was much better. Although it was still very strong. But it was still within a bearable range. Under the encirclement of the real power, one could see that Qin Shujian's soul was being corroded by the silver power bit by bit. The speed of corrosion was very slow. It was not much different from when he was protected by the red lotus of purgation. On the contrary, every time he swallowed the silver crystal, the corroded soul would be greatly replenished. From the outside, Qin Shujian's soul seemed to be shrinking bit by bit. But only he knew. After obtaining the real power, his soul that was corroded on the outside was just impurities at the illusory level. The more impurities corroded, the more benefits it would bring to himself. Because he had abandoned the impurities, what was left in the end was all essence. Come on. After waiting for a long time, it's finally come to this step. Qin Shujian laughed wildly. At the same time, with a thought, the red lotus of purgation was fully activated. In the core of heaven and earth, a huge red lotus suddenly bloomed. Then, a large mass of silver power was forcefully swallowed, while Qin Shujian was frantically refining the real power. The current inner world was also undergoing a drastic change. First of all, it was the mother stream of law that was hidden in the void that directly appeared in front of all living beings. For all living beings in the inner world, they had never seen the mother stream of law appear in front of them. Not only that, compared to the past, the mother stream of law had become more solid and thick. The inner stream of law, it had also become incomparably powerful. Inside the Eldar Hall, Feng and Ling Huang stayed there without saying a word. The aura on their bodies had changed a lot compared to before. However, although their aura was decadent, it seemed to have changed a little. After a long time, Feng smiled bitterly. I'm about to fall from the 9th level of immortal. I can feel that the upper limit of heaven and earth is decreasing bit by bit. If I'm not wrong, the upper limit of heaven and earth is about to fall from the 9th level of immortal. The upper limit of heaven and earth was falling. It should have been a bad thing. However, as the Celestial Emperor, he did not sense any ominous premonition in the dark.
Not only that,
Feng also sensed it. The current heavenly Tao of the world seemed to be cheering in joy. Because of this, his original worry had disappeared a lot. The heavenly Tao would not be wrong. Since the other party did not show any fear, it meant that the changes in heaven and earth were a good thing for the heavenly Tao. Similarly, if it was a good thing for heaven and earth, then it might not be a bad thing for living beings. Foam could feel that although his cultivation level was dropping, the power he wielded did not weaken by much.
it was a subtle change.
It was descending from heaven and earth.
He
And Ling Huang in front of him. They were all the beneficiaries of this change. Yes, I'm about to fall from the 9th level of immortal, Ling Huang said slowly. He did not show any hostility towards Feng. He was just chatting like two old friends. After saying that, the Emperor Eldar stretched out his hand. The rules that he had perfect control of had now slipped out of his control. He could no longer control them completely. However, he could clearly feel it. His own strength did not decrease at all. Although I am about to fall from the 9th heaven celestial realm, I am not the slightest bit weaker than when I was at my peak. Furthermore, I have a premonition that perhaps I am slightly stronger than when I was at my peak.
He paused.
Ling Huang continued, if I'm not wrong, although the upper limit of heaven and earth has decreased, strictly speaking, the upper limit of heaven and earth's power is constantly increasing. In his opinion, the realm of heaven and earth had decreased, but the power was increasing. In other words, originally, the two of them were at the half-step Tao fruit realm, and they had already touched the peak of heaven and earth.
But now,
the upper limit of heaven and earth had decreased. When they were about to fall from the 9th level of immortal, their power was still maintained at the original standard. No, it was even stronger than the original standard. In other words, the upper limit of heaven and earth seemed to have decreased a lot. But in terms of actual power, it was slowly increasing. One fell while the other rose. Ling Huang also understood that this was actually a good thing. Originally, after we reached the half-step Tao fruit realm, we had already reached a point where we could not advance any further. If we went any further, it would be the mysterious Tao fruit realm. Now that our realm has fallen, we have the power to surpass the past. Such a change really surprised me. Feng smiled helplessly. He did not expect. One day, he would use this method to break the limit of the past. The reason was very simple. His realm had fallen, but his power had increased. Which day, when his realm fell to a stable state, he would make another breakthrough. In this way, one's own strength would naturally undergo a metamorphosis. Although he had to make a breakthrough, however, Feng believed it was much easier to make a breakthrough in the true immortal realm than to forcefully break through the Tao fruit realm. The remaining problem, it was the problem of the upper limit of heaven and earth.
soon,
Their auras fluctuated once again. It fell. Feng sighed. Just now, he had successfully fallen from the 9th level of the immortal realm and became a peak 8th level of the true immortal realm. On the other side, Ling Huang's expression remained calm. For things that he had already expected, he would never show an overly anxious look. 8th level of the immortal realm, so be it, as long as his actual power did not fall. Time passed. Their auras fluctuated again. It's falling so fast. Feng's expression could not help but change again. He had only fallen by one realm a month ago, but now, in just 3 days, he had fallen from the peak of the 8th level of the immortal realm to the late stage of the 8th level of the immortal realm. In other words, in less than half a month, he should have fallen to the 7th level of the immortal realm. Such a rapid falling speed also made this heavenly emperor feel alarmed. Ling Huang's calm expression also changed slightly. The changes of heaven and earth are accelerating, and the upper limit has successfully fallen to the 9th level of the immortal realm. However, in comparison, the speed of our fall is much faster than the speed of the upper limit of heaven and earth. When they fell to the late stage of the 8th level of the immortal realm, The upper limit of heaven and earth had just fallen to the peak of the 8th level of the immortal realm. In other words, their own realm fell a little faster than the upper limit of heaven and earth. After the shock, Foam also came back to his senses, and a smile appeared on his face again. Our realm fell faster than the upper limit of heaven and earth. That's also good. At least it proves that in a limited space, we can still make further improvements. What a magical method. I have never thought that one day when my realm fell, I would be able to wield even more power. He had thought that after becoming the Emperor of Heaven, he would be standing at the peak of heaven and earth.
But now,
only then did he suddenly realize. The water of heaven and earth was much deeper than he had imagined. Even if he had become the Emperor of Heaven, there were still many things that he could not control. At this moment, Foam was almost certain that the changes of heaven and earth were definitely related to Qin Shujian. Immediately, he looked at Ling Huang. Now that the realm of all living beings has fallen, it must have caused a lot of trouble. I have to return to the heavenly court to deal with matters. Ling Huang has been staying here all day, so it's inevitable that he will be a little bored. If you have time in the future, you can come to the heavenly court to visit. After saying that, Foam did not wait for Ling Huang's reply, and his figure disappeared from the Eldar Hall. It was just as he had thought. Right now, in the inner world, all the immortals were in a mess. There was no other way. Who wouldn't feel afraid when their realm fell for no reason? Watching Foam leave, Ling Huang did not speak. After a long time, the aura on his body fluctuated, and he fell from the late stage of the 8th level of the immortal realm to the middle stage of the 8th level of the immortal realm. It's falling even faster. In the core of heaven and earth, the power that represented reality had already occupied most of the core of heaven and earth. Only about 20% of the remaining space was left for the gray power that represented unreality to survive. Moreover, this space of survival was still being pressed down step by step, and it seemed that it would not be able to hold on for too long. However, as Qin Shujian continued to refine the power of reality, the originally unreal power was greatly alleviated. The originally unreal power that was being pressed down step by step also slowed down. While the two were buffering, traces of reality continued to fuse with the unreal power, causing the unreal power to transform bit by bit. Yes, transformation. Actually, when reality was devouring the unreal power was also slowly devouring the real power at the same time as it was being devoured, to strengthen itself. However, this devouring power, compared to the devouring of the real power, it was many times weaker. Often, when the unreal power finally managed to devour and refine a trace of reality, it would be devoured by the real power by 100 traces. Over and over again. Not only was the unreal power not strengthened at all, but it was also being devoured by the real power, to the point where it was on the verge of destruction. But now it was different. Qin Shujian was refining the real power to a large extent, allowing the unreal power to be buffered. In this case, the progress of the real power's devouring was greatly reduced. The unreal power found an opportunity and began to attack without restraint. Devour, devour, devour. While Qin Shujian was frantically devouring and refining the real power, the unreal power did not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The natural instinct of the world at the core of the unreal power was constantly devouring the real power to transform itself. However, the world was vast. Compared to the slow refinement of the real power, the time needed for the transformation to succeed was too long. But even so, the core of the world was also changing bit by bit. The limits of heaven and earth are decreasing. In the underworld, Goddess Pingxin looked at the sky above the underworld. Her eyes could directly penetrate the obstacles of the underworld and see the scene in the sky above. There was nothing there. But in the dark, Goddess Pingxin could feel that the limits of heaven and earth were decreasing bit by bit. If it could originally accommodate half-step Dao fruit existences, now it might have fallen to the upper limit of the 9th heaven immortal. Regarding this change, she was not too worried. because she was in existence at the Tao fruit level. What was the Tao fruit? Only when one transcended the restraints of heaven and earth was the Tao fruit. Therefore, even if the limits of heaven and earth were decreasing, it would not affect the Tao fruit. The only ones who would be affected were the cultivators below the Tao fruit level. However, Goddess Pingxin had some guesses about the changes of heaven and earth. Obviously, this change meant that after the invasion of the player world, the world had officially borrowed the real power to transform itself. It was just that this transformation process was very slow. But no matter how slow it was, this transformation was real. The only problem was, would the world be the first to transform successfully, or would the real power be swallowed successfully? If it was the former, then everyone would be happy. If it was the latter, then other than a few Tao fruits, all the other living beings in the upper-class world would die with the world. Without all living beings. Without the upper-class world, how long could the few remaining Tao fruit cultivators last?
Fall.
That would happen sooner or later. I wonder what the Qin Emperor plans to do now. Goddess Pingxin believed that as the Emperor of Heaven, Qin Shujian could not sense the changes of heaven and earth. Now that the other party did not make a move, he must have his own plans. She retracted her gaze. She waved her jade-like hand. The 6 paths of reincarnation disc that had been put away reappeared in the void of the underworld.
Then,
Goddess Pingxin's power erupted and once again absorbed the real power. Rumble. The same vibration. But compared to the first vibration, the vibration this time was even more violent. The void above the underworld collapsed. Countless rule force appeared. Whether it was the ghost servants or the ghosts, they were all shocked when they sensed such a huge change. The huge Fengdu city. Under the fluctuations of this power, they were still trembling uncontrollably. Cracks also began to appear in the prison that was used to suppress the Yin souls. This is Lian Gumming, who was originally in the prison, suddenly saw a crack in a cell. His face was filled with astonishment. In the next breath, he was overjoyed. The prison cell cracked, although he did not know what kind of vibration could cause the prison cell to crack. But it did not matter. Although he had only stayed here for a few months, he was already tired of it. I still have the important task of reviving the Heavenly Corpse sect. I can't be imprisoned here forever. This is my chance, a chance to leave Fengdu City. Lian Gumming's eyes changed. When he saw the other ghosts escape through the crack, he could no longer hold back. Escape. He made a decision. Lian Gumming immediately escaped through the crack, although the crack was only a little bit. But in fact, the ghosts were formless and without substance. Even if it was a small hole, the ghosts could take this opportunity to escape. Not to mention, the crack in front of him was a finger wide. It was as easy as flipping his hand to escape. After leaving the prison, Lian Gumming saw that Fengdu City was in chaos. The ghosts were flying everywhere. Some were fleeing out of Fengdu City, while others were fleeing into Fengdu City from outside the city. And then, there were ghost servants scurrying all over the place. Originally, he was worried that after he escaped, he would be captured by the ghost servants again. But after seeing the many ghost servants who couldn't even take care of themselves, his heart was completely relieved. After being in the prison for so long, after coming into contact with some senior ghosts, Lian Gumming finally understood just how strong the Infernum were. Don't even think about escaping. A cold and stern voice came from afar. He couldn't help but be shocked. When he turned around, he saw Zhao Xian, who had tied up 2 ghosts with soul-restraining chains, rushing in his direction. It's him again. After seeing Zhao Xian, Lian Gumming was scared out of his wits. He didn't forget that it was this ghost servant who had personally imprisoned him in the prison. Without hesitation, his ghost turned into a stream of light and escaped, instantly rushing out of Fengdu City. Damn it! Seeing Lian Gumming escape, Zhao Xian was furious. Just as he was about to rush forward to capture him, he was blocked by the other chaotic ghosts. In the end, he could only watch as Lian Gumming escaped from Fengdu City. In the core of heaven and earth, Qin Shujian's soul silently stayed there. Now, His soul was emitting a faint silver light, and he was no longer afraid of the corrosion of the silver power around him. At the same time, the red lotus of purgation that he displayed was no longer like before, where he could only barely refine a little bit of real power. With a thought, a sea of fire swept out. Pieces of silver crystals were instantly refined. Qin Shujian's divine consciousness wrapped around and absorbed all of the silver crystals. Boom! His soul shook. In the depths of his soul, which was emitting a faint silver light, there was an extremely condensed silver light flickering there. At this moment, Qin Shujian felt that he was transforming. This kind of transformation, it was completely different from the previous realm breakthroughs. He seemed to have sensed that he seemed to have obtained some kind of new life. It was a completely different feeling. It emerged from the bottom of his heart. This is real power. Qin Shujian muttered to himself with a crazy look on his face. Real. This was reality. Back then, when he entered the real world and reincarnated, he could be considered to have temporarily gotten rid of the illusory level and transformed into a real existence. However, that was a world without cultivation. Even if he transformed into a real existence, it was useless. There was no spirit energy there. There was no cultivation at all.
So,
in the end, Qin Shujian still intercepted a trace of real power and then returned to the vast thousand domains. From the beginning to the end, his foundation had never truly transformed. But it was different now. After refining a large amount of real power, Qin Shujian could clearly feel that his spirit had undergone a complete transformation. That kind of transformation, it was exactly the same as when he was reincarnated into the real world. No, it was even more intense than when he was reincarnated. Because, at that time, he was just an ordinary person. The current him, he was a real, true immortal. Yes, true immortal. After constantly getting rid of the illusory and retaining the real, Qin Shujian had long fallen from the Dao fruit realm. Then, he fell from the half-step Dao fruit realm to the current 9th level immortal realm. However, this kind of falling did not stop at all. While Qin Shujian was constantly refining the power and his soul was transforming his realm, it was falling rapidly. 8th level immortal, 7th level immortal, 7th level immortal, 5th level immortal. After his realm fell to the 1st level immortal, it still did not stop. Very soon, his realm fell from the true immortal realm back to the peak of the celestial being realm. For this, Qin Shujian did not stop it at all. He was still crazily absorbing the real power to further transform his soul. 9th level celestial being realm, 8th level celestial being realm, 7th level celestial being realm. In less than a day, his realm successfully fell from the celestial being realm back to the divine martial arts realm.
then,
The divine martial arts realm did not stop. Spiritual martial arts, true martial arts, basic martial arts. When his realm completely fell to the 1st level of the basic martial arts realm, and all his cultivation was reset to 0, the falling realm finally stopped. At that moment, Qin Shujian's soul had completely transformed.
then,
It was from the core of heaven and earth that he withdrew his spirit from. The soul entered the body. The body sitting upright in the heavenly palace suddenly opened its eyes. A sense of weakness that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. In the sea of consciousness, Godslayer and Zhou Tian Star Map were quite shocked at this time, because they found out Qin Shujian's power suddenly declined to the extreme, as if he had no cultivation at all. At the same time, the sea of consciousness was collapsing step by step. If it were not for their support, the sea of consciousness would have returned to a chaotic state. Just when the two divine weapons were shocked. In the body, Qin Shujian's newly opened inner world absorbed all the true strength and completed its transformation. Then, a vast amount of energy began to surge out and nourish Qin Shujian's body. Basic martial arts, true martial arts, spiritual martial arts, divine martial arts. His cultivation level began to recover, and it was recovering at a very fast speed. In just a few breaths of time, Qin Shujian was already firmly standing on the celestial being realm. And this improvement, it did not stop at all. Come. As the inner world fed back, he spat out a word.
Then,
there was an endless amount of spiritual energy between heaven and earth, all converging in the direction of the heavenly palace. At that moment, the world changed color. From Dao fruit experts to ordinary cultivators, they were all shocked by this vast spiritual energy fluctuation. As all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth converged towards the heavenly palace, the spiritual energy of the Great Thousand Worlds suddenly dropped by 90%, leaving only 10%. What on earth is he doing? Such a change completely shocked Hongjun and the others. Even as a Dao ancestor,
for such a change,
even Hongjun was shocked by this. Judging from the vast spiritual energy concentration in the Great Thousand World, even if a Dao fruit tried his best to absorb spiritual energy, it was impossible to really absorb all the spiritual energy to this extent. Besides, at this level, breathing in and out spirit qi was of no use at all. A Dao fruit expert, he had long reached the peak of the universe. If he wanted to improve his strength, only enlightenment could play a role. Therefore, Dao fruit generally would not absorb a large amount of spiritual energy in the Great Thousand World for no reason.
Because that way,
it would have a great impact. Could it be? Hongjun suddenly thought of a possibility, and there was a look of shock on his face.
Then,
he shook his head again. It's impossible. Right now, the Great Thousand World hasn't really transformed. If he wants to take this opportunity to directly get rid of the false and retain the true, it won't be so easy. If we Dao fruit want to truly get rid of the false and retain the true, we can only intercept part of the power at the moment when the Great Thousand World transforms successfully. Hongjun's face was gloomy. Get rid of the false and retain the true. This was the goal of any Dao fruit. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to pursue these things even after several epochs.
Then,
Hongjun forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart. Because, in his opinion, even if Qin Shujian had the power of the immortal saint realm, it was impossible for him to truly complete the transformation at this time. As a result, the commotion caused by the other party, it was very likely that it was because of other reasons.
Thinking of this
Dao ancestor's heart that was raised also gradually relaxed. After all, if Qin Shujian was the first to break through, then his Dao fruit would seem a little ridiculous. If the immortal saint realm could still contend with him, then an existence that had truly transformed would definitely have no chance of contending with him. Getting rid of the false and retaining the true, that was an all-round suppression. Chapter 1132. 7th level of the celestial being realm. 8th level of the celestial being realm. 9th level of the celestial being realm. Qin Shujian didn't care about the guesses of the outside world. He was frantically absorbing the spirit energy of heaven and earth and combining it with the power of his physical body to raise his realm again. Very soon, his realm reached the critical point of the 10th level of the celestial being realm again. In the past, he had been stuck at this realm for a long time.
Now,
Qin Shujian had quietly broken it. Perfected immortal. Boom. When he officially broke through to the perfected immortal realm, endless pressure spread out from his body, causing the huge heavenly palace to tremble slightly. In the hall, countless Dao runes were engraved, and now they were cracking under the pressure. Immediately after, new Dao runes appeared. Emperor of Heaven, Mu Yang, who was rooted in the heavenly palace, was truly shocked. He felt a destructive force erupting from the inside of the heavenly palace. In front of that force, he was like an ant. It was as if he could be completely destroyed with a light touch. So, Mu Yang retreated very simply, even though he didn't know what had happened. But that fluctuation, it was really shocking. But what was surprising was that fluctuation. From the beginning to the end, it only lingered in the heavenly palace. When he left the range of the heavenly palace, he couldn't feel it at all.
Such a change.
It shocked Mu Yang again. What exactly is the Emperor of Heaven doing? Could it be that he has succeeded in breaking through again?
He found it hard to imagine.
What kind of existence could be so terrifying just by relying on his aura? This kind of terror. It was much stronger than when he faced the pressure of the Tao fruit in the past. As a divine tree that was rooted in the heavenly palace all year round. And it was the Emperor of Eldar. Mu Yang's strength could be considered top-notch in the heavenly palace. But with such strength, he didn't have the confidence to resist such pressure. He had a premonition. If this pressure erupted completely, all the immortals and gods in the heavenly palace would be turned into ashes in an instant and no longer exist. Fortunately, the situation was different. What he expected didn't happen. That terrifying pressure only enveloped the heavenly palace and did not affect the entire heavenly court. Otherwise, on this day, it would be the death anniversary of the entire heavenly court. Inside the heavenly palace, Qin Shujian was surrounded by a sea of spiritual energy. His strength was increasing steadily with every breath he took. However, compared to the previous leaps and bounds of growth, his current realm had increased. It was much slower. First Heaven Immortal Middle Stage. Late Stage First Heaven Immortal. Peak of First Heaven Immortal. Second Heaven Immortal. Every breakthrough of a small realm was accompanied by an even more powerful aura. After a long time, finally, the fluctuation of the spiritual qi gradually dissipated. The spiritual energy dissipated. Feedback to the 4 great continents. All of the living beings and cultivators were like travelers who had been thirsty for a long time. They began to gulp down the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to alleviate the pain of the spiritual qi drying up. It has calmed down. Inside the underworld, Lady Pingxin had been paying attention to this change from beginning to end. When she saw that the spiritual aura had calmed down, she understood that the unknown change had finally calmed down. In the dark, she seemed to have a premonition, but she couldn't be 100% sure. At this moment, Lady Pingxin retracted her gaze and looked at the 6 paths of reincarnation in front of her again. Originally, there was only the heaven path.
Now,
there were already 2 more streaks of light. One was the beast path. The other was the Azura path. After 3 paths appeared, the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation became even more terrifying. Under the suppression of this supreme treasure, the space in the huge underworld became more and more stable. Unless one reached the true immortal realm, one would not have the qualifications to break through the space. Similarly, the underworld's territory. Under the suppression of the supreme treasure, it was also growing larger step by step. All the changes. They were all developing in the best direction. Regarding this, Lady Pingxin did not feel any joy. She understood. Right now, it seemed like the best development, but in reality, it had not reached the step of success. Not long after, the true calamity would descend. If they could survive the calamity, then the underworld would naturally open up the 6 paths of reincarnation. On the contrary, if they did not survive the calamity, then everything in the underworld would be reduced to ashes in an instant. Looking at the 6 paths of reincarnation, Lady Pingxin sighed deeply. There's no turning back. If we fail this time, there won't be a next time. If they failed in the past, they could still wait for the next era to arrive. But if they failed now, there wouldn't be a next era. The reason was very simple. If the invasion of a few-player world succeeded, all traces of the upper-class world and the universe would be devoured completely. They had never existed. Naturally, there wouldn't be any so-called rebirth. So, if they didn't fail, then so be it. Once they failed, all of his efforts would be for naught. Facing such a consequence, even with Lady Pingxin's temperament, she still felt a great deal of pressure. Heavenly Court. In the inner hall of the Heavenly Palace, Qin Shujian dispersed all the spiritual energy, and the pressure that spread out from his body gradually retracted. His expression was calm, and then he silently checked the changes in his body. Then, a long-lost smile appeared on his face. Success. He had really succeeded. From the beginning of the 3rd era to the moment when this era was about to end, He had finally completed the transformation. That kind of joy. It wasn't something that could be described in a sentence or two. At this moment, the collapsed sea of consciousness had also recovered to its original state. And compared to the original sea of consciousness, the current sea of consciousness was many times more stable. Even when Godslayer was swallowing the saber energy, it didn't have the slightest effect on tempering. Not only that, there was also a mysterious power emitted from the sea of consciousness, causing some subtle changes to the two divine weapons. He could feel his strength increasing with every passing moment. Godslayer couldn't help but be shocked. One had to know. He was already an immortal divine weapon. In the entire universe, the immortal divine weapon was the top existence. It wasn't that. At this level, there was no possibility of improvement. However, even if he could improve, it was impossible to improve so quickly. His strength was increasing every moment. It almost made Godslayer think that he had returned to the time when he was worshipped by the human race in the inner world. At that time, under the worship of the vast human race, his strength was like now, increasing every moment. Then, it didn't take long for him to successfully cross over to the level of 9 tribulations Zubing. Moreover, after reaching that level, there was no rest. The change in front of him.
It was so similar to the change at that time.
Regarding this, Godslayer couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Emperor of Heaven, may I ask, what realm are you at now? What realm? In the face of Godslayer's question, Qin Shu Jian smiled slightly. Now, I should be at the level of a second-level immortal, after getting rid of the false and retaining the true. First, all his cultivation was reset to 0. Then, with the reverse nourishment of the inner world, his cultivation was restored again, and finally stopped at the level of a second-level immortal. Although it was a second-level immortal, but Qin Shu Jian understood. The power that he now wielded was completely incomparable to the power that he had before his transformation. What immortal saint realm? What Tao fruit? In front of him now, it was just a joke. It was a complete transformation. He had successfully gained full control of the true power. This power, it was above the illusory level. It was not something that the power of the illusory level was qualified to compare with. After all, the level of the true power was really too high. If one wanted to use quantity to make up for quality, the difference in the ratio was so big that it made one feel hopeless. Qin Shu Jian had a premonition. If it was the current him who attacked the him before the transformation, the previous him would definitely not be able to last more than 10 moves. Even if he used all his trump cards, he wouldn't be able to extend the time on this basis. Unless he borrowed the power of the immortal weapon. But even so, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Without getting rid of the false and retaining the true power, Qin Shu Jian had no way to truly understand how terrifying the true power was.
Until now.
After he had completely transformed, he had gained control of the true power. Only then did he deeply understand how powerful the true power was against the illusory power. At the same time, he also understood how high was the probability of failure of their original plan. If I didn't succeed in the transformation, when the battle started, even if I used all my trump cards and cooperated with the other Tao fruits, the chances of winning against the player's worlds would be less than 30%. Qin Shu Jian's eyes shone with a cold light. A 30% chance of winning. That was already taking into account all the backup plans. But even so, there was only a 30% chance of winning. Of course, a 30% chance of winning was already not low. After all, getting rid of the false and retaining the true was an extremely difficult thing. Over the eras, many Tao fruits had fallen under the true power. In order to achieve this step of getting rid of the false and retaining the true, many Tao fruits had worked hard for this. In the end, to be able to get a 30% chance of winning was already a very high success rate. However, for Qin Shu Jian, he naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity to have a higher chance of winning. Before he transformed, if the boundless worlds only had a 30% chance of winning, then now, the chance of winning had at least increased to 50%. No, it's more than 50%. The myriad Tao of the player's world have collapsed, the true immortals don't exist, and the power of the heavenly Tao has been greatly weakened. With my current means, combined with the other forces and backup plans of the boundless worlds, I have at least a 70% chance of winning. Qin Shu Jian thought to himself. A 70% chance of winning. In a confrontation involving several worlds, although it wasn't a 100% chance of winning, it wasn't too far off. Moreover, it wasn't time for the war to start yet. He still had some room for improvement. When the real battle began, their chances of winning would be even higher. Second level immortal. He got an answer. Godslayer couldn't help but be stunned. He felt that Qin Shujian's power had clearly become unfathomable, but his realm had fallen so badly.
Then,
Godslayer thought of something and had a rough guess in his heart. For this, Qin Shujian didn't explain too much. Some things were understood, and if he didn't understand, he didn't understand. There was no point in saying more.
Then,
he just calmed his mind and entered the inner world. The current inner world. It had become completely different. First, after the heaven and earth transformed into a real existence, the upper limit fell from the half-step Tao fruit realm to the first level of the true immortal realm. And, for example, Feng, Ling Huang, and the others, who were originally half-step Tao fruit realm experts, could only barely maintain the realm of the true immortal realm. They were only one step away. They would fall from the true immortal realm again. In addition, all the immortals and gods of the heavenly court and the myriad races fell from the true immortal realm and became cultivators of the celestial realm. Fortunately, after the heaven and earth transformed, all living beings seemed to have been reborn, and all aspects of their lifespans had begun to be calculated again. Or else, just the problem of the fall in realm and the decrease in lifespan was enough to make all the true immortals whose realms had fallen instantly turn into ashes. However, although their realms had fallen, everyone discovered that the strength they had didn't fall at all. Not only did it not fall, instead, it was even stronger than before. In the heavenly court, Feng sat on the throne, and below him were the many immortals and gods of the heavenly court. Looking at those people, he smiled bitterly in his heart.
to be honest,
Although Feng knew about the changes in the world, he didn't expect the changes to be so great. Not to mention that the upper limit was directly reduced from the half-step Tao fruit realm. Moreover, it made the world almost reach the point where true immortals didn't exist. Fortunately, he had a deep foundation and the support of the heavenly court's providence. Otherwise, he would have fallen to the true immortal realm. He thought to himself. However, the expression on his face was indifferent. Now that the world has changed greatly and the realms of all living beings have fallen, there might be some people secretly using methods to disrupt the order of the heavenly court. Therefore, pass down my order. At this time, any race that tries to cause trouble will be suppressed. If the circumstances are serious, they should be completely annihilated. There is no room for mercy. Feng's voice was cold.
his realm had fallen.
Some races might have some thoughts that they shouldn't have. After all, the heavenly court was originally ruling, and its strength was firmly above the myriad races. But now that their realms had fallen, it seemed that everyone was about the same. Some ambitious races might feel that they could do it again. At this moment, if the heavenly court didn't suppress them, there would definitely be a lot of trouble in the future. Any mercy would be sowed for the heavenly court and the human race in the future.
Therefore,
Foam would definitely not allow these unstable factors to exist. Hearing this, the gods bowed and accepted the order. We will obey the orders of the Emperor of Heaven. Go. The order of the heavenly court is not to be provoked. Foam waved his hand. When all the immortals saw this, they bowed and retreated.
soon,
He was the only one left in the huge heavenly court. At this moment, when the gods were originally standing, Qin Shujian's figure suddenly appeared there. He sensed some fluctuations. Foam immediately woke up from his contemplation. When he saw the person in front of him, his face immediately lit up. He hurriedly got down from the throne and walked in front of Qin Shujian. Then he bowed solemnly. Greetings, Venerable One. Emperor of Heaven, there's no need to be so polite. Feng had long been puzzled by the changes in the world. Now that he finally saw Qin Shujin appear, he couldn't wait to ask the question in his heart. May I ask, Venerable One, are you aware of the changes in the world? Of course. Qin Shujin nodded. He already knew that the other party would ask this. After a pause, just now he patiently explained. The changes in the world are a good thing. Although the limits of the world have fallen a lot as more and more experts appear in the world, the upper limit will also rise step by step. Although your realms have fallen at the same time, your strength hasn't decreased by much. In this way, there's still a lot of room for improvement in the future. If you can recover your former realm, your strength will definitely increase by leaps and bounds. In Qin Shujin's opinion, half-step Dao fruit was so strong. Now that it had fallen to the level of a true immortal, it was still the same strength.
No.
It meant that he had greater strength than before. In that case, if the later realms recovered to the level of half-step Dao fruit, how strong would it be? After all, seriously speaking, the difficulty of breaking through from true immortal to half-step Dao fruit was much lower than breaking through from half-step Dao fruit to Dao fruit. Even if, after getting rid of the false and retaining the true, the difficulty of increasing one's realm would increase a lot, but it was still the same. Moreover, the experts whose realms had fallen had once reached that realm. With the experience of the previous time, Zhang Xian could not help but sigh. The difficulty of breaking through the next realm would be correspondingly much lower. This was another advantage of getting rid of the false and retaining the true. After all, the world and experts who got rid of the false and retained the true were all existences who had successfully changed their fates. Then it wouldn't be a problem to give some benefits. Hearing this, Feng's heart settled. He hadn't sensed any negative consequences from the changes in the world. Now that he heard Qin Shujin's affirmative answer, he understood even more. As long as there was no problem, then it was enough. His realm had fallen, but his strength had increased instead of decreased. That was a great thing.
Then
Feng wanted to ask something again, but he was directly interrupted by Qin Shujin. Some things will naturally be understood when you reach that realm. The world is very big now, but you must know that there's always a sky beyond the sky. One day, when you really break the limits of the world and enter another level, at that time, I'll give you an opportunity. Opportunity. Feng was a little excited, but his many years of cultivation allowed him to control his emotions very well on the surface. I will remember your words, Venerable One. In today's world, how many true immortals exist, and how many celestial being realm cultivators? Qin Shujin changed the topic. Ever since his inner world had gotten rid of the false and retained the true, it was impossible for him to sweep the entire world with a thought like before. Unless, if he could truly reach the Dao fruit realm, that would be a different story. A real world. It had never been something that an illusory world could compare to. Although, Qin Shujin's current strength was much stronger than when he was a Dao fruit expert. But one thing had to be clear. Apart from pure strength, Dao fruit realm experts had other divine abilities and methods. His strength had become stronger. But some of the methods of the Dao fruit realm had been temporarily lost. Only after reaching that realm again could he use those mysterious methods. Such methods. It had nothing to do with strength. Instead, it was the embodiment of a realm. Feng pondered for a moment and replied, right now, the limits of heaven and earth have fallen. Most of the true immortals have fallen to the celestial being realm. Currently, only Ling Huang and I can remain as true immortals. As for the celestial being realm cultivators, there are quite a number of them. But as for how many there are, I can't give you an accurate answer for the time being. There were really too many cultivators in the inner world. Even as the Emperor of Heaven, it was impossible for him to know how many celestial being cultivators there were in the myriad races. Especially now. Almost all the true immortals had fallen from the true immortal level to the celestial being level, causing the number of celestials to increase by quite a bit. Qin Shujin nodded. In another year or two, I will have a great battle. At that time, I will need to borrow the power of the heavenly court. Be prepared. Great battles. Feng's expression changed slightly. To be able to hear the word great battle from Qin Shujian's mouth, then it was easy to imagine what kind of battle it would be. Moreover, with the other party's methods, he was actually reduced to borrowing the power of the heavenly court. Then the opponent would probably be extraordinary. Looking at the change in his expression, Qin Shujian said indifferently, "You don't have to worry too much. This time, I am borrowing the power of the heavenly court because the world that is at war is not as strong as the heavenly court, so I need the help of the heavenly court." At this point, he was not lying. Although the upper-class world had existed for many years more than the inner world. However, now, the inner world had gotten rid of the false and retained the true. All the living beings in the world had successfully transformed at the same time. In this way, the overall strength of the inner world was much stronger than that of the upper-class world. In other words, the current inner world was actually equivalent to a player's world, and it was not something that the player's world that was on the verge of destruction could compare to. Feng said, "Venerable One, you mean that there is a battle in other worlds and now you need the help of the heavenly court?" "That's right." Qin Shujian nodded. "That world is especially important, so I need the heavenly court to do its best. There can be no mistakes." His expression was solemn. Training an army for 1,000 days and using it for a moment. He had spent so much effort to cultivate the inner world, and now it was finally time for it to play a role. Hearing this, Feng's expression became serious. "Venerable One, don't worry. The heavenly court will definitely do its best in this battle and will not let you down." "That's the best." Qin Shujian nodded in satisfaction. Immediately after, he changed the topic and said, "Now the heavenly court is on standby. When the battle starts, I will send a signal. At that time, you can receive the signal in the inner world." At this point, a palm-sized small door appeared in Qin Shujian's hand. Subsequently, he placed the small door in Feng's hand. "This door is the key to the other worlds. Keep it well, but without my permission. You can't use it without my permission. Otherwise, if you miss it in the space-time turbulence, even a true immortal will die." "I understand." Feng put away the small door and then nodded with a solemn expression. From Qin Shujian's words, he could hear that this battle was unusual.
So,
in Feng's heart, he didn't dare to be careless. After handing the small door to the other party, Qin Shujian said, "All right, I still have other things to do. Get ready." As his voice fell, he disappeared from the heavenly court. The Venerable One really comes and goes like a ghost. Feng couldn't help but sigh. He still didn't notice the fluctuations when Qin Shujian left. From this, it could be seen. The other party's strength was still unfathomable.
Subsequently,
Feng recalled the news he had just heard. There was no limit in the universe. In fact, he had this conjecture a long time ago. Outside the heaven and earth, there was another heaven and earth. It was just that the outside of the heaven and earth was chaos. Even with his own strength, it was impossible to create chaos. So, Feng hadn't explored the outside of the heaven and earth too much. But now Qin Shujian's words undoubtedly confirmed this point. Outside the heaven and earth, there really was another heaven and earth. It seems that I have to prepare in advance. He sighed in his heart. Although Qin Shujian didn't say anything, as the Emperor of Heaven, Feng could still keenly sense that the war he spoke of was definitely not simple. Even with the current strength of the heavenly court, he had great confidence in himself. However, no matter how much confidence he still had to have the confidence that he should have. As for the other heaven and earth, Feng had never had any contact with them. But now, he was about to prepare for war with the other heaven and earth. If he said that he wasn't nervous at all, he would be lying to himself. After leaving the heavenly court, Qin Shujian didn't leave the inner world. Instead, he went straight to the lower realm. The small door he gave to Feng was a treasure that wasn't considered a treasure that he had forged himself. Why was it considered a treasure when it wasn't considered a treasure? The reason was simple. That small door had no other use. The only use. It was just to travel between the two realms. At the same time, there were a total of 2 small doors. One was in Qin Shujin's hands, and the other was in Feng's hands. Among them, the small door in Qin Shujin's hands could travel between the 2 realms at will. But the small door in Feng's hands could only be used after the small door in front of him was activated. The reason why he did this, the main reason, it was also because Qin Shujin didn't want people from the inner world to travel between the 2 realms without permission and cause unnecessary trouble. He came to the lower realm. His footsteps didn't stop. He was still heading down. After an unknown period of time, Qin Shujin felt as if he had been transported to another space, and the environment around him had suddenly changed. Desolation, loneliness, ghastly. Many feelings surged in his heart. In his line of sight, all he could see was a river with no end in sight. The river water was different from ordinary river water. It was faintly yellow, and at the riverside, there was a small boat. On the boat was an old man wearing a bamboo hat and a straw raincoat. Qin Shujin walked slowly towards the boat. When he was in front of it, he asked calmly, "Boatman, can you ferry people to the other side? This place is called the Yellow Spring. After crossing the Yellow Spring, you can enter the underworld. The underworld is a place where dead spirits gather. Living people shouldn't get close, but the Venerable is a sacred being of heaven and earth. Naturally, you are not included." The old man's expression was respectful, and his tone was also respectful. Hearing this, Qin Shujin raised his eyebrows. "You've heard of my existence." This old man was born with the underworld, and can be considered a living being raised by heaven and earth. Naturally, I've heard of the Venerable. Now that the underworld has just been established, the Venerable has come. It's the underworld's honor," the old man said with a smile. Qin Shujin took a deep look at the old man. With his eyesight, he could also see that the other party's strength was firmly above the true immortal realm. One had to know. In the current world, the only true immortals on the surface were Feng and Ling Huang. The person in front of him now was another true immortal. Moreover, Qin Shujin also knew the other party appeared with the birth of the underworld. If he was in the underworld, his strength would be even more incomparable to an ordinary true immortal. Stepping onto the boat, he didn't say anything. The old man said, "Sit tight," and then pushed the boat away from the shore, heading into the distance. Standing on the boat, Qin Shujin looked at the Yellow Spring with his hands behind his back.
To be honest,
this was the first time he saw the Yellow Spring. Even though he had heard of the name of the Yellow Spring in the real world when he was reincarnated. However, in the illusory world, there was no Yellow Spring. It was very simple. The underworld in the illusory world was incomplete. It lacked the 6 paths of reincarnation, and it was impossible for the Yellow Spring to exist. Only in the real world could there be the Yellow Spring and other things. Now that he had truly stepped into the Yellow Spring, Qin Shujin truly understood how mysterious the underworld was. In his line of sight, the water of the Yellow Spring was calm. From time to time, ghosts could be seen wailing inside, constantly struggling to get out of the Yellow Spring, but there was no way at all. When they saw the arrival of the boat, those ghosts frantically rushed towards the boat, trying to escape the restraints of the Yellow Spring through the boat. However, the boat looked ordinary, but it had endless mysteries. No matter how the ghosts climbed, they couldn't get close to the boat at all. "This is the Yellow Spring," Qin Shujin sighed. Hearing that, the old man pushed the boat and explained with a smile, "Yes, this is the Yellow Spring. This should be the first time the Venerable One has come to the Yellow Spring. There are living beings dying every moment between heaven and earth, and the dead creatures will be drawn and naturally come to the underworld. Those who don't have too many sins can fly over the Yellow Spring and truly enter the underworld. But those who have too many sins will fall directly into the Yellow Spring and sink until the sins on their body are washed away. Only then can they come out of the Yellow Spring." Qin Shujin nodded slightly. He had some understanding of these matters in the past. As far as the eye could see, the Yellow Spring was almost filled with ghosts. From this, it could be seen There were many sinful people in the world. However, after a long time, there would definitely be ghosts coming out of the Yellow Spring.
They didn't come out now.
This was because the underworld had just been established. The ghosts had just entered the Yellow Spring and had not had time to wash away their sins. Naturally, there was no possibility of them coming out. Immediately after, a gust of wind blew in the Yellow Spring. The old man explained at the right time. The wind in the Yellow Spring is called the soul-devouring wind. If any ghost is blown by the wind, their soul will be shaken and their soul will be destroyed. If they are born in the Yellow Spring and are blown by the soul-devouring wind, they can avoid the fate of their soul being destroyed. It's just that it's inevitable that they will be seriously injured. While he was talking, there were already many ghosts that were blown by the soul-devouring wind, and their souls were shaken. However, although the soul-devouring wind was powerful, it had no effect in front of the boat. No matter how strong the wind was, the boat was as stable as ever and was not affected in the slightest.
To this,
Qin Shujian was also indifferent. Although the boat looked ordinary, it was actually a treasure of the underworld. It was extraordinary. After sailing in the Yellow Spring for a while, Qin Shujian suddenly asked, "Other than the sovereign, are there any other living people who have entered the Yellow Spring?"
no.
The old man shook his head. The underworld has just been established and has not completely stabilized. Other than the Venerable One who can directly enter the underworld, the rest of the living people do not have the qualifications to enter the underworld. Even if it's the Emperor of Heaven, it won't be easy for him to break into the underworld. The Emperor of Heaven he mentioned was the current wind. Qin Shujian smiled faintly. "You know a lot about the heavenly court. I can't say that I understand them. I've only heard some news from the mouths of those spirits." The old man shook his head. The Yellow Spring was lonely. He was the only one who existed. In the past, other than communicating with the ghosts, there was nothing else to talk about. While the two were talking, the boat had already sailed to the other side of the Yellow Spring. When standing on the shore and looking at it, the Yellow Spring seemed to be endless. But when the boat was really sailing, although the Yellow Spring was wide, it was not to the point of being endless. When the boat came to the shore, the old man stopped and said, "Venerable One, this is the end of the Yellow Spring. This old man has a duty and can't leave here. The rest of the road will depend on the Venerable One. Forgive this old man for not accompanying you." "Thank you." Qin Shujian nodded, and then left the boat. Immediately after, the old man rowed the boat back, as leisurely as ever. He turned around and took a look. Qin Shujian turned around again and looked at the scene in front of him. After the Yellow Spring, there was an endless wilderness. It was similar to the underworld that Goddess Ping Xian opened. But the difference was, the underworld here was even bigger. Ghosts could be seen wandering everywhere, and monstrous Yin energy was spreading here.
Soon,
Some ghosts discovered Qin Shujian's arrival. Immediately after, those Yin souls immediately surrounded him, the flesh and blood of a living person. To the ghosts, it was an irresistible delicacy. Impudent. Qin Shujian's eyes turned cold, and a vast aura erupted from his body. In the next moment, all the Yin souls that came near were turned into ashes. Such a terrifying commotion caused the Yin spirits that were about to charge over to scatter in all directions in fright. Although ghosts were dead spirits, it didn't mean that they were fools. On the contrary, many ghosts retain their memories from when they were alive. After all, it had only been 1,000,000 years since the beginning of the world. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was dense. Cultivation was prevalent. Almost every living being had a strong cultivation base when they were born. In this way, it was normal for a cultivator's divine soul to retain their memories. However, although those ghosts didn't dare to get close to Qin Shujian, they fought with other ghosts. In Qin Shujian's line of sight, after some ghosts devoured other ghosts, their strength increased greatly, and they began to wantonly devour other ghosts again. He saw this scene, but he didn't have any intention of stopping it. When the underworld is established, the ruler of the underworld should also be born. Now that there are no signs of life in the underworld, I'm afraid that the ruler of the underworld will be born from these Yin spirits. Qin Shujian thought to himself. No matter where it was, there must be a person in charge. As an existence that was qualified to be comparable to the heavenly court, the underworld was even more so. Now that the underworld had just been opened, other than the ferrymen of the Yellow Springs, no other living beings had been born. Then it was obvious. The next ruler of the underworld would be born from the ghosts.
So,
killing was inevitable. After a simple look, Qin Shujian continued to go deeper into the underworld. Not long after, another river appeared in his sight. Compared to the vastness of the Yellow Springs, the river in front of him was neither wide nor narrow. When he saw the river, a name involuntarily appeared in Qin Shujian's mind. River of Forgetfulness. Immediately after, he saw a bridge on the river. Bridge of Helplessness. River of Forgetfulness. Bridge of Helplessness. Granny Meng's soup. 3-life stone. Right now, River of Forgetfulness and Bridge of Helplessness have both left, but Granny Meng hasn't been born yet, so Granny Meng's soup naturally doesn't exist for the time being. As for the Stone of 3 Lives, it might be in front. Qin Shujian stopped in front of the Bridge of Helplessness. The facilities that the underworld should have were almost all born, but it was far from perfect. The biggest problem, even the ruler of the underworld had not been born. The ruler had not been born. That meant that the order of the underworld had not been perfected. However, the natural birth of the underworld had already meant that the inner world had officially become a real world. The current underworld. It was much better than the half-baked underworld that Goddess Pingxin had opened. Not to mention anything else. Just the ferryman of the Yellow Springs that was born could beat all the ghosts in the underworld. That was a true innate god. When he grew up in the future, his strength would be immeasurable. Moreover, even now in the underworld, the other party had absolute strength.
to be honest,
If he wasn't the controller of heaven and earth, Qin Shujian felt that with his strength of a second-level immortal, he might not be able to deal with the ferrymen of the Yellow Springs in the underworld. The blessing of the underworld was too terrifying. However, as the controller of heaven and earth, he had the blessing of heaven and earth. Compared to heaven and earth, hell alone wasn't enough for Qin Yi. In this way, if he really wanted to fight, Qin Shujian was still confident that he could suppress the ferrymen of the Yellow Springs with one palm. After a while, he stopped in his tracks and finally took a step forward. The Bridge of Helplessness was not long, but when he walked on it, Qin Shujian's mind couldn't help but sink into it. Scenes of the past appeared in his mind. There were memories of the Third Era. There were also memories of reincarnation and recultivation. Finally, the scene froze at this moment. When Qin Shujian came back to his senses, he realized that he had unknowingly reached the end of the Bridge of Helplessness. It turns out that when one walks on the Bridge of Helplessness, living beings will recall all kinds of things in the past, recalling everything that had just happened. There wasn't much emotion on his face. Finally, his gaze fell on a stone in front of him. The stone was tall. It was about 10 feet or so. Standing there, Qin Shujian could clearly see that the memories in his mind were all displayed on the stone. Stone of 3 Lives. In this way, the name of the stone was on the verge of being revealed. Recalling one's life on the Bridge of Helplessness, the Stone of 3 Lives reappears, causing living beings to recall all kinds of things in the past. Finally, after drinking a bowl of Mengpo's soup, the past will vanish like smoke in thin air and no longer exist. Qin Shujian took a deep look at the Stone of 3 Lives, then turned his head to look at the place next to the Stone of 3 Lives. There was a stone platform there. But now, there was not a single person on the stone platform. Yellow Springs, River of Forgetfulness, Bridge of Helplessness, Stone of 3 Lives, Meng Patai. Qin Shujian slowly walked in the underworld, taking in more than half of everything inside. The current underworld. It was chaotic. Many souls that had fallen between heaven and earth had all gathered here, then killed each other to determine the strongest existence. That existence. was the ruler of the underworld. Now that the destiny of the underworld is scattered, every soul more or less has a bit of destiny in them. The stronger the soul, the more destiny of the underworld will gather in them. If this trend continues, it won't be long before the true ruler of the underworld will be born. Qin Shujian looked at everything around him, then thought silently in his heart. The process of the souls being devoured. It was also the process of gathering destiny. But this process would not be slow, but it would also not be fast. He thought that it would not be long, at least dozens or hundreds of years. For the strong, 100 years was equivalent to the snap of a finger. However, in Qin Shujian's view, 100 years was a long time. It was very simple. The faster the ruler of the underworld appeared, the faster the order of the underworld would be stabilized. When the time came, the laws of heaven and earth would be perfected. His inner world would become stronger. At the same time, as the ruler of heaven and earth, his strength would also increase to a certain extent. Although the transformation of the inner world is successful now, the underworld has not completely stabilized, and there are still some flaws. When the underworld stabilizes, the upper limit of the inner world will definitely increase a lot. Qin Shujian put his hands behind his back, and his divine consciousness was immersed in the underworld. The current limit of heaven and earth could only accommodate a first-level immortal. But if the underworld was perfected, and the rules of heaven and earth were further perfected, then the limit of heaven and earth was very likely to be promoted to the third level of true immortal. Regarding this, he very much hoped that the rules of heaven and earth could be perfected. His divine telekinesis sensed something. The huge underworld had completely turned into an azura field. An uncountable number of Een souls were engaged in a fierce battle. Some of them, they had already grown to the level of divinity. It's just that divinity is still too slow. Qin Shujian stepped into the air and then came to the sky above the underworld, and the supreme pressure instantly spread out. At that moment, all of the Een spirits that were in the midst of battle trembled in the face of this pressure. Even if it was the most powerful of Een spirits, in the face of this pressure, they couldn't resist at all. Qin Shujian looked down at the underworld, like a god from the 9 heavens, and his deep voice spread throughout the underworld. I will leave 10 drops of essence blood in the underworld, and whoever gets the essence blood will be the ruler of the underworld. After saying that, his left palm split, and 10 drops of essence blood condensed with a wave of his hand. Then, with a flick of his left hand, the 10 drops of essence blood flew in all directions, disappearing into the surrounding void. Then, the pressure disappeared. After a few seconds of silence, all of the Een spirits rushed towards the blood essence as if they had gone mad. Although they didn't know what kind of existence Qin Shujian was. But one thing was clear. Once they got the essence blood of such an expert, they would definitely be able to advance by leaps and bounds. Moreover, the ruler of the underworld that the other party mentioned, coupled with the supreme pressure, was also involuntarily convincing. The essence blood is mine. I'm the ruler of the underworld. None of you can snatch it from me. The essence blood is mine. Roars and roars. Then, an earth-shattering battle began. In order to fight for the essence blood, none of the souls had any intention of holding back. Everyone could understand. If they could become the ruler of the underworld, it was equivalent to having a supreme status. Looking at the souls who were constantly fighting for the essence blood, Qin Shujian nodded his head in satisfaction. His 10 drops of essence blood. It wasn't a simple thing. A normal true immortal's essence blood had great power for cultivators below the true immortal realm. Not to mention, he was also the ruler of heaven and earth. With this relationship, the essence blood he released would be even more powerful. Anyone who obtained the essence blood would indirectly receive the fate of the underworld. As a result, becoming the ruler of the underworld was naturally not a problem. Then, Qin Shujian didn't pay any more attention to this matter and continued to walk towards the depths of the underworld. There was a mysterious aura that was attracting him. It was predictable. In the depths of the underworld, There must be an extremely powerful treasure. What he needed to do now was to meet that supreme treasure. The essence blood of the ruler of heaven and earth. It really makes one yearn for it. The ferryman of Yellow Springs looked at the essence blood that flew away, his turbid eyes flashing with a burning gaze. Inside the underworld, no one knew better than him just how powerful Qin Shujian's essence blood was. That was the essence blood of the ruler of heaven and earth. Whoever obtained the essence blood would receive the blessings of heaven and earth. As for the increase in strength, that was just a side benefit. If possible, he wanted to fight for the essence blood. After all, although he was quite strong now, after obtaining the essence blood, there was a high chance that he would truly reach the peak of this world. In fact, taking this opportunity, becoming the ruler of the underworld wouldn't be a problem. However, the ferryman of Yellow Springs also understood. He was a living being that was born when the underworld was born. His natural duty was to ferry the souls of the Yellow Springs. It was impossible for him to become the ruler of the underworld. Besides, Qin Shujian's essence blood was obviously left for those souls. If he went to fight for it and caused that person to be unhappy, it would be troublesome. The ferryman of the Yellow Springs was well aware of how strong Qin Shujian was. If the other party wanted to erase him, it would be a piece of cake.
For a chance.
Sacrificing his life, he didn't have the determination to do so. I'm doing a good job as the ferryman of Yellow Springs. When the order of the underworld stabilizes, my place will probably be more lively. But 10 drops of essence blood to create 10 rulers of the underworld, isn't that a bit too much? The ferryman of Yellow Springs shook his head slightly. He originally thought that 1 ruler of the underworld was enough. But now it seemed it wasn't as simple as just 1 ruler. 10 drops of essence blood were enough to create 10 rulers of the underworld. For a moment, the ferryman of Yellow Springs was a little unclear about what Qin Shujian was planning. Why did he want to create 10 rulers? If they didn't get along, then the underworld would very likely fall into internal strife. However, there was one thing he was clear about. That was, this kind of thing wasn't under his control, and he didn't have the qualifications to interfere. After looking in the direction of the essence blood and the resulting battle, the ferryman of Yellow Springs withdrew his gaze. In the depths of the underworld, there was a piece of chaos there. The chaos was slightly surging, as if something inside was about to be born. A supreme pressure was emitted from it, forcing the other ghosts to not dare to approach this place. However, this kind of pressure was nothing to Qin Shujian. He resisted the pressure and walked towards the chaos as if he was strolling in the courtyard. In the end, in front of the chaos, he stopped. Qin Shujian stood there motionless. His divine sense broke out of his body and fell directly into the chaos in front of him. After a long time, he withdrew his divine sense with a strange expression on his face. There's actually more than 1 supreme treasure that was born. The real underworld is really a creation of heaven and earth. In his perception, the supreme treasure that was born in the chaos wasn't as simple as one. One had to know. Something that could be called a supreme treasure was at least of the innate level. Especially now that the underworld had just been born, the supreme treasures that were born here had gathered a large amount of the underworld's luck. On top of that, there was that supreme pressure.
So,
Qin Shujian was almost certain. The supreme treasure that was born here was very likely to be a Khanate supreme treasure. Such a Khanate supreme treasure. It wasn't a Khanate supreme treasure at the illusory level in the great wide world, but a real Khanate supreme treasure. From that oppressive might, he felt an aura that was even more powerful than that of the Godslayer. In other words, the supreme treasure that was born here was much more powerful than the immortal magic weapon. Qin Shujian looked at the chaos, and his expression gradually calmed down. That's true. The immortal magic weapon seems to have surpassed the Khanate supreme treasure, but it has only broken through the level of illusion and reality. There's still a gap between it and a real supreme treasure at the real level. Unless the immortal magic weapon can transform further, it might have the possibility to contend with the Khanate Supreme Treasure. Khanate Supreme Treasure. There was a huge gap between it and a Khanate Supreme Treasure. A Khanate Supreme Treasure at the real level could easily crush a Khanate Supreme Treasure at the illusory level. After all, there was a huge difference between the real and the illusory level. However, the immortal magic weapon broke through this boundary. In this way, even though the other party couldn't compare to a real Khanate Supreme Treasure, it was definitely a powerful existence in the real world. Otherwise, the birth of the immortal magic weapon wouldn't cause the heavenly Tao of several worlds to awaken in advance. However, Qin Shujian wasn't sure how strong the immortal magic weapon was for the time being. It was definitely not as good as a Khanate Supreme Treasure at the real level, but where a Khanate Supreme Treasure was placed, it was definitely close. There were definitely a lot of magic weapons that were worse than a Khanate Supreme Treasure at the real level. Therefore, he had to try to know what level the Godslayer was at. After taking a few glances at the chaos, Qin Shujian turned around and left. Now that the Supreme Treasure hadn't been born yet, he couldn't force it to be born. An existence of this level. Naturally, it had time to be born. Interfering rashly, it was very likely to damage the essence of the Supreme Treasure. For Qin Shujian, everything in the inner world was his own property. Every additional Khanate Supreme Treasure would strengthen the destiny of heaven and earth and improve his strength at the same time. Under such circumstances, he couldn't destroy the city wall. It's best if it can be born within 2 years. Otherwise, it won't be of much use in the next battle. When Qin Shujian left the underworld, the battle in the underworld still didn't stop. 10 drops of essence blood seemed to be a lot, but there were more than billions of ghosts in the underworld. 10 drops of essence blood in front of billions of ghosts was not enough at all. Roar, this essence blood is mine. No one can snatch it from me. A ghost king of the celestial realm, whose body was like a small mountain, roared angrily. When the palm fell, a large number of ghosts couldn't dodge in time and were forcefully annihilated by this force. Some ghosts were grabbed and directly put into the mouth to chew. Seeing this, some of the weaker ghosts instantly woke up, looked at the hill-like ghost king in fear, and then quickly retreated. Ghosts were also afraid of death. The strength of the ghost king in front of them was obviously not ordinary. With their strength, they didn't have the confidence to fight against it at all. However, while some of the Een souls were retreating, there were other powerful Een souls that were approaching at an extremely fast speed. If you want the essence blood, you have to ask me first. A young man in white stepped on the air, and when he waved his right hand forward, monstrous Een energy erupted, condensing into thousands of long swords and pouring down. The sword rain covered. That ghost king became the main target of attack. However, the ghosts that lived near the ghost king were also affected by it. For a moment, a large number of ghosts were strangled by the sword rain. The ghost king let out a roar, and when the big hand blasted out, a large number of sword rain were shattered. However, with the intensive attack of the sword rain, his skin gradually cracked, revealing the essence of the Een energy inside. The essence blood is mine, the ghost king roared unwillingly. Seeing that the essence blood was in front of him, he was unwilling to give up. In his heart, there was a voice that kept telling the ghost king, as long as he swallowed the essence blood, he would be the king of the underworld. As long as he swallowed the essence blood, he would definitely be able to break through and become a supreme existence. All kinds of temptations made the ghost king erupt with unprecedented power. In the end, he forced his way through the domain of the sword rain, and his broken body arrived in front of the essence blood. Seeing this, the young man's expression suddenly changed. How dare you? He didn't expect that the ghost king would be able to break through his sword rain attack and even come to the essence blood. Seeing that the other party was about to swallow the essence blood, the young man no longer held back and directly displayed a sword that reached the sky. However, his attack was fast. The ghost king was even faster. The hill-like body opened its bloody mouth and directly swallowed the essence blood. Boom! A terrifying aura erupted from the ghost king's body. Immediately after, Dark red blood flowed out from his body, and then instantly formed a blood cocoon. When the long sword fell, it happened to hit the blood cocoon. The long sword turned into energy and collapsed. The blood cocoon didn't move. This scene caused the young man to be both frightened and frightened. He didn't expect that the Ghost King would actually swallow the essence blood in front of him. And the defensive power of the blood cocoon in front of him was simply terrifying. His sword just now, even if it was to kill a heavenly Ghost King, there would be no problem. But it couldn't shake the blood cocoon at all. From this, it could be seen how strong was the blood cocoon's defensive power. But if he gave up just like that, the young man was unwilling. Immediately, he erupted with all his strength and constantly bombarded the blood cocoon. Even so, there was no result. After an unknown period of time, the blood cocoon suddenly shook. The young man's somewhat tired spirit was suddenly refreshed. It was going to break. There was a look of surprise in his eyes. After attacking for so long, was he finally going to break the blood cocoon? As long as he broke the blood cocoon and stopped the Ghost King from refining the essence blood, then he still had a chance to seize the essence blood.
Suddenly,
the young man increased the strength of his attack.
Soon,
a crack appeared in the blood cocoon. Just as a smile appeared on his face, a terrifying aura fluctuation came out from the crack. At that moment, the young man's smile stiffened on his face. Not good. As if he had thought of something, he didn't dare to hesitate and hurriedly fled into the distance. Even if the blood cocoon had already cracked, he couldn't care less about attacking again. At this time, the blood cocoon suddenly cracked open. A ghost hand that emitted endless energy reached out from inside and grabbed at the young man in the air. You attacked so happily just now, you might as well stay. A low voice sounded. When the young man looked back, he happened to see a terrifying ghost hand covering his vision. No. He let out a roar of unwillingness. A large amount of energy burst out, turning into a shocking sword that slashed out in an attempt to destroy the ghost hand. But it was useless. When the shocking sword slashed on the ghost hand, even the ghost hand couldn't shake it at all. Immediately, the long sword was destroyed. The young man was directly grabbed by the ghost hand and then pulled into the blood cocoon. The sound of chewing was heard. In the next breath, the blood cocoon shattered. The Ghost King, who was originally like a small mountain, had now returned to the size of an ordinary person. Wearing a black robe, his originally ferocious face had become dignified and solemn. He looked up at the sky above the underworld, as if he had sensed something.
Then,
the Ghost King spoke loudly. From today onwards, I am the King of Hell. As soon as he finished, the underworld shook. Immediately after, endless energy scattered down from the underworld, nourishing the many ghosts in the underworld. In the next breath, another supreme pressure swept out, causing most of the ghosts to tremble in fear and couldn't help but bow down. Greetings, King Yama. King Yama, the ferryman of the netherworld muttered to himself. He looked at the majestic body in the sky, his expression calm the entire time. With his profound cultivation, it could be seen that although the King of Hell had not reached the true immortal realm, he had reached the limit of the heavens. Moreover, in the underworld, the other party had the blessing of luck. Even if it was an ordinary true immortal, he would be able to contend against them. Not long after, another imperious aura was unleashed together with the voice. From today onwards, I am King Chujiang of the underworld, another expert at the limit of the heavens. The ferryman of the netherworld exclaimed. One limit of the heavens was fine, but looking at the current situation, it was likely that the 10 controllers would all be existences at the limit of the heavens. 10 limits of the heavens. In the underworld, it was equivalent to 10 true immortals. As a result, it was enough to be considered earth-shattering. He even suspected that with the current strength of the underworld, even the heavenly court might not be able to suppress it. After all, the limits of the heavens and earth were there. The realm of all living beings fell. Whether or not the heavenly court could gather 10 true immortals was still a problem. After looking at it for a long time, The ferryman of the netherworld retracted his gaze. Who cares how many kings there were in the underworld? It had nothing to do with him anyway. He was a ferryman in the Yellow Springs. As long as the underworld was not destroyed, he would be immortal. There were many things. There was no need to pay too much attention to them. At this moment, with the birth of King Yenluo and King Chujiang, other kings soon came into being. For a moment, the underworld was shrouded in a supreme pressure. When the kings came into being, that terrifying power even rushed out of the underworld and affected the heavenly court.
Now,
the heavenly court shook slightly. The gods were all shocked. Feng sat on the throne without moving, looking at the scene below with a solemn expression. The underworld has come into being. Before the underworld came into being, he didn't know what the underworld was. But after the underworld came into being, there was a message from the heavenly Tao.
So,
Feng also knew what kind of place the underworld was.
Hearing that,
Immediately, an immortal god asked, "May I ask, Emperor of Heaven, what exactly is the underworld?" The other immortals didn't ask back, but their faces were filled with doubt. Feng calmly said, "The living beings are under the jurisdiction of the heavenly court, and the dead spirits are under the jurisdiction of the underworld. All living beings in the world have a long lifespan, and when their lifespan is up, they will shed their living bodies and turn into dead spirits. They can enter the underworld and search for a chance to reincarnate." Reincarnation and rebirth. The expressions of all the immortals changed. This was not a difficult task for a powerhouse. After all, if the strong wanted to be reborn, there were many methods to do so. But if the weak wanted to be reborn, it wouldn't be so easy. At this moment, Feng continued, "In addition, the underworld has come into being, and the order of heaven and earth has been perfected. All the strong are not allowed to reincarnate on their own. Once their lifespan is up, they will go to the underworld and accept the trial of the underworld, waiting for the reincarnation arrangements. Anyone who is reborn without permission may be punished by the underworld." At this point, he added, "The underworld is not weak. Now that it has just come into being, there are already experts comparable to true immortals. If they really want to violate the rules of heaven and earth and fight against the underworld, I will not interfere." Feng's expression was indifferent. He knew that the existence of the underworld was to stabilize the order of heaven and earth. This was a good thing. Ever since the underworld came into being, Feng sensed that the rules of heaven and earth were being perfected, and the upper limit was also being opened bit by bit. As the Emperor of Heaven, if heaven and earth were stable, he would also be able to obtain great benefits. In this way, it was even more impossible for him to interfere with the matters of the underworld. At least for now. Helping the underworld stabilize the order was beneficial to the heavenly court. As for the other immortals and gods, when they heard this, their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't reincarnate without permission. What did this mean? It meant that no matter how powerful an existence was, if they died, they would still die. They could only let the underworld arrange their reincarnation. Such an approach, that would be very passive. Not only that, according to the Emperor of Heaven, the strength of the underworld was still terrifyingly powerful. It wasn't weaker than the heavenly court at all. Just the fact that a true immortal was born was enough to shock people. Following the birth of the kings of the underworld, that terrifying aura spread out. The experts of the world immediately turned their gazes towards the underworld. However, the underworld was blocked by Yin Qi. At this stage, the experts simply didn't have the qualifications to see through the underworld. At the same time, the primal chaos in the depths of the underworld suddenly surged violently. A terrifying power was being nurtured there. After a long time, a ray of light flew out from the primal chaos and rushed towards King Yama, who was the first to appear. When the ray of light arrived in front of King Yama, it suddenly stopped. King Yama looked over. In front of him was a book. On the cover of the book, there were a few large words engraved. The Book of Life and Death. The Book of Life and Death had appeared. The 6 paths of reincarnation were also officially born. At this time, the underworld could be considered to have been completely established. The world rumbled. All the top experts could sense that the upper limit of the world was rising bit by bit. Second level immortal. Third level immortal. Fourth level immortal. Only when the limits of the world had completely stabilized at the peak of the fourth level immortal did everything come to a complete stop. The underworld is complete, the peak of the fourth level immortal. Ling Huang muttered to himself. He was constantly aware of the changes in the world. There was no other way. The changes in the world were so great. If he didn't pay attention to them at all times, he wouldn't be able to feel at ease. The fact that he almost fell from the true immortal realm was already quite shocking.
Now,
it was a good thing that the limits of the world had officially risen to the level of the fourth level immortal.
Then,
Ling Huang looked at the position of his palm. There was a spirit talisman lying quietly there. He crushed the spirit talisman. A paragraph of words appeared. The Venerable One has ordered the myriad races to prepare for war. Eldar, get ready as well. The voice was the sound of the wind. However, the content of the words made Ling Huang not dare to underestimate it. The word Venerable One. It could explain everything. Venerable One. He thought of the few times he had met the other party. Even now, when he thought about it, he felt as if he was in a dream. Whether it was the half-stepped Dao fruit from before, or perhaps he had just stepped into the true immortal realm. Ling Huang thought about it and realized that he couldn't see through Qin Shujian at all. That Venerable One was terrifying. It had completely exceeded his limits. Since it's the Venerable One's order, then Eldar should prepare for war. Since that person can get the myriad races to participate in the war, I'm afraid the war won't be ordinary. Ling Huang's expression was extremely solemn. The enemy of the strong was naturally the strong. If that Venerable One could settle it with his methods, there would be no need for the myriad races to interfere.
Now,
since the other party had asked the myriad races to interfere, it meant that the enemy's strength wasn't weak. It could even be said to be very strong. At this moment, it was to the point where the myriad races had to help. In view of this, Ling Huang couldn't think too much about it. In the void, this was the gathering place of the Sky Fiend clan. Since the establishment of the Heavenly Court, the myriad races had united as one. The Sky Fiend clan had lacked the opportunity to take advantage of the situation.
Not only that,
during this period, the Heavenly Court had even organized a war. The Heavenly Court's powerhouses, who were led by the wind, had taken the lead to attack the void, causing the Sky Fiend clan to suffer heavy losses.
Until now,
the Sky Fiend clan, they were still in the stage of recovery.
Fortunately,
the void was the Sky Fiend clan's home ground. In addition, the Sky Fiend clan's strength wasn't weak. Even in the face of the Heavenly Court's large-scale attack, with the geographical advantage, they still weren't completely defeated.
Now,
in the void, the Sky Fiend clan was dancing wildly. But none of the Sky Fiend clan dared to descend. In the main hall, Marcus was now the only emperor of the Sky Fiend clan. And below him sat some of the original Sky Fiend emperors. For many years, this demon emperor of the Sky Fiend clan had long since successfully broken through to the half-step Dao fruit realm, suppressing all the other Sky Fiend emperors and becoming the demon emperor. Regarding this, the other Sky Fiend emperors didn't dare to object. In the Sky Fiend clan, strength was everything. As a half-step Dao fruit realm, Marcus wasn't someone ordinary upper three true immortals could compare to. As a result, it was only natural that he would become the demon emperor. Even until now, the limits of heaven and earth fell. Marcus had fallen to the realm of a first-level immortal, but he was still the demon emperor. The reason was simple. Marcus, who was half-step Dao fruit, had fallen to the realm of a first-level immortal. As for the other Sky Fiend emperors, none of them were able to stabilize their true immortal realms and collectively fell to the Nirvana realm.
And so,
Marcus was still the strongest of the Sky Fiend clan. There seems to be some movement in the lower realm. Could the Heavenly Court be preparing to launch a large-scale attack on the Sky Fiend clan again? A deep and cold voice rang in the main hall. Although the Sky Fiend clan hadn't paid attention to the news of the lower realm for a long time, the movements of the myriad races preparing for war were simply too great. Even if Marcus didn't pay attention, he could still sense the vast fluctuations. Thinking back to a few years ago, the Heavenly Court's large-scale attack, there was resentment and killing intent in his eyes. His Sky Fiend clan was the strongest race.
Now.
But other races had come knocking on their door. If they were defeated by a single race, they could still say that their skills were inferior, and they would be convinced of their loss. But the problem was, it wasn't a single race that defeated the Sky Fiend clan, but the result of the alliance of myriad races. With such a premise, Marcus had a great deal of unwillingness and anger in his heart. That was to say, the Sky Fiend clan's strength hadn't recovered yet, and he didn't have the confidence to deal with the Heavenly Court. Otherwise, early on, this Demon Emperor had already led the Sky Fiend clan to launch an attack on the Heavenly Court.
Below.
A Sky Fiend Emperor shook his head slightly. The actions of the lower realm don't seem to be targeted at us Sky Fiend clan, but we don't know the specifics for the time being. His tone was grave. It was basically the same expression as the other Sky Fiend Emperors, compared to the dozen or so Sky Fiend Emperors at the beginning.
But now,
many seats were empty. There was no need to elaborate on the reason for the empty seats. The Sky Fiend Emperor was a true immortal of the upper 3 grades and had powerful life-saving means. Only a powerhouse of the Heavenly Court could kill a Sky Fiend Emperor. Now that the Heavenly Court's possible attack on the Sky Fiend clan was involved, they had to treat it with caution. We shouldn't have stopped Ling Huang from breaking through back then. Otherwise, the glory of the human race wouldn't be there today. Marcus's expression was cold. If the Sky Fiend clan hadn't stopped Ling Huang from breaking through back then, giving the human race an opportunity to take advantage of, the position of Emperor of Heaven today would have long been Eldar's, and not the human race's. In the end, not only was the Emperor of Heaven not grateful to the Sky Fiend clan, but he got rid of them after they had outlived their usefulness. He mobilized the Heavenly Court's powerhouses and joined forces to attack the Sky Fiend clan, causing the Sky Fiend clan to suffer heavy casualties. Even a few Sky Fiend Emperors had fallen. This enmity and hatred, he wouldn't forget it even after 1,000,000 years. Soon after, Marcus said, "Investigate. I want to know what the Celestial Court is planning to do to the point of mobilizing all races. If it's not to attack my Heavenly Fiend race, what kind of enemy could make the Celestial Court make such a big move?" He gave the order directly. The world was just that big. Apart from the Sky Fiend clan, Marcus really couldn't think of anyone else who could make the Heavenly Court take such a big action. For the sake of caution, it was better to ask around. Just in case. If they were really going to attack the Sky Fiend clan, then he had to be prepared in time. Don't be fooled by the fact that they were dissatisfied with the Heavenly Court and couldn't wait to destroy it. But Marcus knew that too. The current Sky Fiend clan was still too weak compared to the Heavenly Court. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.